Welcome, everybody. There he is. To the special February 23rd, 2018 Board of Commission meetings. Please silence your cell phone, pagers, and other electronic communication devices. Agendas are located at the back of the chambers. Holly is going around with a sign-up list. Office managers for speakers requests. So if you would like to get on that list, please get with Holly and get signed up. With that, we're going to do a moment of silence and reflection of Pledge of Allegiance. George, you want to do that?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First item on the agenda is the review and approval of the agenda.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Moved by Hadcock, seconded by DeSanto to approve the agenda. Any discussion? Hearing none. Roll call vote.
Buskerud,
Aye.
DeSanto,
Aye.
Farabee,
Yes.
Hadcock,
Aye.
LaCroy.
Aye. With that, we move on to item number 5. Public hearing and commission work session for ordinance amendment OA 17-02 Pennington County to amend the section 103 definitions. Section 205-B-17 General Agriculture District and section 212-B-12 Heavy Industrial District, section 507-B Mining Permits, and section 511 Fees, and to add section 320 Mining Operations to the Pennington County zoning ordinance. First reading was approved at 2/20/18 in the commission meetings. First, I'd like to go over a little bit of discussion of how we're going to work today. Today, we have the sign-up list for speakers. And I think it's proper that we've taken some extra public comment between our last 20th meeting and today. We reviewed that. So we'll take public comment. We're going to limit it to 3 minutes per person. And then we're going to start going through the agenda ourselves as a commission to do some work on it. So that's how we work. And if a commissioner has a question from somebody in the audience and so forth, they'll be allowed to call them back up to ask questions or so forth. One of the things I want to kind of just review just a second with this ordinance is the purpose of it. The purpose of the ordinance of section 320 is to promote public health, safety, general welfare, permit the development and utilization of resources in a manner that's compatible with neighbors and land uses, prevent degradation of existing private and public water supplies, and minimize the potential adverse environmental effects through the use of best management practices, all consistent with comprehensive plan. I just wanted to refresh everybody's, that's the purpose of this ordinance. And there's been a lot of public comment on this. I believe we've had just the commission alone over 7 hours of public comment, and that's not including the planning commission, and that's not including all the work that the committee had done for 12 months. I just want to express that this ordinance took a lot of work from a lot of people. It's like building a bridge between two parties and trying to get them to come together. And when you first start out, you need the engineers, you need the experts to build it and so forth. But there's also going to be, and then towards the end when you have the plan and so forth, then you bring people into it and you get all the comments and you work on it. And you can change it, work on it as you go. So this is by all means not a final product. It's going to be as a working document, as someone put it. And we're looking to find common ground as a commission to work on this and be fair to everybody. So with that, I am going to, Holly, do you have a list? Did you want to call them up, or do you want me to? I'd appreciate that. That way. And you're going to time?
I will time, yes.
Okay. So what's going to happen with the timing, she'll call your name up, and I think it's green's go, yellow means you have 30 seconds left, and red means you've hit your 3 minutes. So just please be respectful for everybody in the commission, and we'll get started.
Jim Dean, please.
Hello, Jim Dean, Dakota Stone, Hill City. I was kind of hoping to get 3 minutes on each item that I wanted to talk about. Is that the way it's going to be, or I just get 3 minutes?
We're just going to do the 3 minutes, and if the board has further discussion on something, we may call you up.
Okay, well, I'm going to try and do this really fast then. The A1 General Agriculture District, you've got in here that you guys want to change it to where you have to have a conditional use on that? Am I reading that right? To me, that's a waste of time for the commissioners and the mining people and everybody that's involved, because if you do everything that you're supposed to in this permit, I don't know what else you would do other than just spend time and money on a conditional use permit in the agricultural district where it's already allowed. The consent with the tribes as far as sending them out letters, if you have a permit in the Black Hills on Forest Service, that's already been done. So I'm hoping that we can take that out and just add that to private property, where if you're gonna mine on private property, you have to send the letters out to the tribes. But, which I don't know if there's gonna be a lot of people agreeing to that. The tribe should just be paying attention, and if they want to come for the public hearings, they should come for the public hearings, just like any other citizen of Pennington County. The distance that was suggested at a half a mile is kind of crazy. I would hope that we could work on that a little bit and get somewhere between 500, and a half mile is quite a ways. Hoping that can just stay at 500. Let's see. As far as expansion goes, I think you should look at possible situations where the miner is reclaiming as he goes. And if he has to move a little bit into an area that's already been planned to move, I don't see why that should have to become a new permit. As long as it's already been looked at prior, you just aren't in that footprint. We keep our footprint small to keep our reclamation bonds low. So we reclaim as we go. So if we reclaim an area, then we have to move a little bit. That's not really an expansion, that's just more of a movement. And then, we just don't want to have to pay $2,000 every time we make a movement. And then also waste all your time going through a whole nother permit when the area is already permitted. And just one more thing, quickly, as far as the
Time.
mines, can I just finish real quick? The mines that you've spent years and years trying to get developed into a permit, which it takes a lot of time. Sometimes we have to be 5 to 10 years out on what we're working on just to keep the permit process ahead of us. So to have to, after 5 years, if you didn't work in an area, to have to go in and do a whole new permit process, that's really not going to work very good, because it just needs to be looked at as a renewal
Yeah.
Because all the permit stuff is done unless something has changed, drastically. That's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim, and we did get your email too.
Pardon me?
We did get your email too.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Thanks a lot for listening.
while he's here, can I ask a question?
You can call him back up.
Well, but while it's hot, you know more
Mr.
about this
Farabee.
than we do, but you say the Forest Service has to notify the tribes as part of the permit process?
Yes, there's a scope. Any of the Forest Service license permits that we have, or the small-scale permits that we have, go through the tribal council.
The Forest Service does all?
Yes, the Forest Service does all that, yeah, and a lot of times they don't, if they don't like our cultural study, then we have to do another cultural study to, to make the tribal people happy.
Thanks, James.
But the communication is all on them?
That's all on them, yeah. Now, on a license deal on private property, that's not
I understand, but Forest Service, which is the.
Forest Service does, yeah, that's something that happens in your permit process with the Forest Service.
All right, thanks, James.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Anybody else? Can I answer? Thank you.
Okay, Sylvia Cox, please.
I wish to cede my time to Mike Hickey or Julie Parker as they may elect.
Is that something this commission's wanting to?
Kelsey Parker.
I'm looking at,
I'm in agreement.
We've done it before.
okay.
Don Berger, please.
Hi, Don Berger. I also cede my time to attorneys Hickey and Parker.
Is somebody are you keeping track? Okay.
Dwayne Abada.
I see my time. Attorneys Kelsey Parker and Michael.
Okay, I'd just like to remind everybody to, when they, please announce who your name, say your name and so forth, so that we can have it on record.
My apologies. Dwayne Abada.
And you yield your time to,
Attorneys Kelsey Parker and Michael Hickey.
okay.
Mr. David Miller, please.
I'm over here, so if I am, you tell me, I know I can speak. Is this going to deal at all with Hard Rock? I've been at a funeral and I have not caught up. It's not? No. Okay, well then I won't take people's time. All right, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Next is Kelsey Parker, unless we have others that want to yield to her before that. Karen Abada.
Yes. I need to come up here.
Yeah.
Karen Abada, and I yield my time to Kelsey Parker. Thank you.
Should have 15 minutes.
Joel Brannon. To who, sir? No one? Mary Jo.
Thanks for letting us do it. I'm Mary Jo Farrington, and I would like to cede my time to Nancy Hilding.
Okay, we can jump back up to Kelsey or go to Nancy Hilding.
Anybody else? Kelsey?
Kelsey Parker, y'all be happy to hear that. I'll just reserve any time that we need while you go through the ordinance page by page, if you'd like to hear from us. I submitted an email kind of late in the afternoon with some just minor amended changes to the ordinance, but we'd be happy to answer any questions or comment as you go through the ordinance.
Kelsey, I think that is an excellent idea.
Thank you.
Thank you.
As we go through it, I think we're going to have questions, and I appreciate your thoughtfulness on that.
Okay, Nancy Hilding, please.
Nancy should have 10 minutes or 6 minutes.
6 minutes for Nancy.
I'm not sure. Can I do what she did and reserve my 6 minutes as you go through it page by page?
I think,
Is that what you're
I think
doing?
with Kelsey, she's got like 15 minutes, and I think technically,
The bottom line
I-
is, she's saying if we have questions to ask her.
yeah,
Oh,
She's not saying that she's gonna sit up here afterwards and
Yeah.
get 15 minutes. Miss
if we
Nancy.
have questions, we'll ask you too, Nancy.
Yes, Miss Nancy.
I'm giving you something I already gave you. You still don't have that sentence on page 2 figured out correctly yet. I'm just going to quickly go. If you get into the public notice section, I've added up what you're giving to put in the newspapers, and I come up with 17 days because I added it up. And I think that's completely inadequate public notice in the paper. When it comes to the purpose, we find the qualification of minimize potential adverse environmental effects through use of best management practices. That's actually not permissive, that's limiting, because best management practice are all should, not shall, they're voluntary. So you're actually making the environmental effects worse by qualifying it with best management practices. We'd like you to get rid of best management practice. I've said that before. We talked to the attorney last time, and we asked where the laundry list of things to consider when you're doing a conditional use. It's in the thing where you're reviewing. It's on page 5. When reviewing a mining permit application, there's A, B, C, D. There's a bunch of things there, and those are the things that you're going to consider, like for conditional use. We find that list completely inadequate. It should have something about wildlife and tribal, archaeological kind of concerns. Somewhere in here, I don't have the pages all. You could have a situation where you have a mine that is, you have your boundary with 2 tribal counties. You could have a mine that's partially on tribal county and partially in Pennington County. So in some places where you're going through this laundry list of comply with state, local, federal rules, you should have tribal when applicable, because part of the footprint could be in Pennington County and part of it could be in a county and tribal jurisdiction. Okay, so we completely object to the setback of 300 feet. We think the setback should be larger. We think it should be 500 feet. We think you should mimic Lawrence County. Look up how they have their buffer thing set. They have it 500 feet, and then they have this, it could be smaller, it could be larger, depending on all of these things you have to consider. One size does not fit all. You're going to have different situations, like they ask you to look at in Lawrence County, the topography, the population density in the nearby areas, the land use in the nearby areas, the access. There's lots of factors you should be looking at, and you should not have one size fits all setback. Okay. And someplace in here, when they're submitting the application, they're just supposed to say dwellings that are within 300 feet, but you're not allowing dwellings to be within 300 feet. So that needs to be expanded also outward to 500 feet. We are still unhappy with the, there's 2 issues, or the big issues. There's the renewal of mine permits that are done under this ordinance, and then there's the grandfathered in pre-existing ones that were not permitted in this ordinance. And the way we read your grandfathered in section on page 17, you're including making them comply with subsection H of 320, which is about setbacks and monitoring wells. So if you can, for the grandfathered in ones, add additional new conditions, which you have done here, then we think you should add a whole mass of other additional new conditions for the grandfathered in ones. We don't like, we don't think that the language for the grandfathered in ones is sufficient. We're very worried about the existing 194, 192. How am I doing for time?
There's no way to know. You just have to watch the clock, Nancy.
Oh, is it gonna?
It'll flash yellow when you have 30 seconds and turn red when you're done.
It's yellow right now.
No, it's not. It's green. You've probably got a minute or two left.
All right, okay, so, if we go back, to the renewal of the existing permit, we are completely unhappy with, who has the ability to contest this, which is, people who have property within 500 feet, the people who can ask for hearing. We think that that should be much broader. There's lots of other people who could be having adverse impacts. I've got bad lungs. It could be somebody with a health issue whose respiratory is being affected by all of this. I'm glad you added a complaint section. I think that you
30
should.
seconds.
All right. So when you send out the original notice the first time, it should include a warning that these people need to complain, if they find something wrong, or it'll be rubber stamp renewal. That needs to be said out front when you begin permitting, and there should be a sign everywhere around the property indicating that this is a mine, is permitted, and it'll be renewed. And if you've got a complaint, you better make that complaint. That should be clear.
Time.
And these are huge areas that are permitted that just have a fence around them. They should be required to have a sign every so often indicating that this could be a future mine. Because a person buying a house nearby has no clue when the mine is 2 miles away that this is a permitted and licensed mine.
Thank you, Nancy.
Signs all over the place.
And Nancy, I just wanted to take a moment to thank you for all the work that you've done on the committee, because there's been a lot of changes to this that you've helped on. So
I have a lot more comments. My problem is the legislature's in session, and I follow that, and I have other duties.
Okay.
And this is the worst time in the year for me to be able to write to you, because I'm writing constantly to a different audience. I just don't have time.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
thanks. Do we have any more people
Is there
signed up?
anyone else that's come in afterwards that hasn't signed up to speak that would like to?
Gina Parker.
I know you.
Gina Parker? In case the people have came in, we're doing a three-minute comment. So Gina, did you want to speak? You're next.
I'm Gina Parkhurst, and I live in Rapid City, and I actually don't have any new comments to add, but I would like to gift my 3 minutes to Nancy Helding if she needs more time. Nancy, do you need more time? Nancy? Thank you so much.
You bet. 3 more minutes, Nancy.
To get back in gear here. I remember what I said already. Okay, so we want more people to have notice, to be able to appeal or request a hearing for renewal under this ordinance.
We were on
Oh,
complaints,
all right,
Nancy.
so I've said this before. Lawrence County differentiates between large and small operators, and they have different cost charges for them, and they have different requirements. The big guys can be required to do more things than the little guys. So I still suggest that here, and I'm actually being friendly to the little miners here. I suggest that you go through this and you create large and small, different fees. If you look at Lawrence counties, they charge a whole lot more than you are charging. Okay, so the other thing that Lawrence County has that you don't have is it has a socioeconomic study for the large mines. Remember, it's differentiated between large and little. And I request that you also consider having that. Once again, we object to putting the Forest Service lands in there as a future land use when you guys haven't even adopted the plan, indicating that you've already made decisions on the future land use. Okay, for screening and burns, we are concerned, we're not sure what this means. A screening plan shall be developed by the applicant appropriate to the site. Berms shall meet the following requirements. I think in some instances, berms are needed. In other places, they're not needed, or at least maybe not needed now. And in other places, they would be completely inappropriate, such as in floodplain. So I'm not sure what that means, but I think there should be, this is now conditional use, I think. I think that's what this red thing here means. So you might be clear that there can be some discretion about berms. We would like more added to protect wildlife. As we said, we'd like the purpose clause worked on, and that laundry, and we think that you need a lot of work on the stuff that you're going to review, wherever that was. I've already said that. Okay, we're concerned. We're concerned for how people are going to complain about air quality issues. There are very few monitoring sites in South Dakota that.
Time.
All right. Okay. But to finish that thought quickly, there's no monitor that goes out there if you complain about air quality to see if the air quality is bad. All they can do is review to see if they've been spraying water like they promised to spray water. So I don't know how you can verify a complaint about air quality.
Thanks, Nancy.
Okay, sir. Royce?
Come to 10 minutes.
3 minutes.
How are you doing?
My name is Royce Gay. I'm Native American who's a spiritual advisor. I do a lot of prayers and with the Oglala Sioux Tribe, I'm an enrolled member. So I was told they were doing commentary. I've been speaking with Heidi and other people concerning the issue of the Mineral Mountain up in Pushlar near. So on behalf of a lot of indigenous people, I've been to Washington. I spoke with a lot of the legislation, and we're currently taking a trip up there to protect a lot of these sacred sites that we consider, very important to our people. And to have any type of construction or mining up there would be detrimental to a lot of those sacred sites that are there. And I feel that this community has, it's been a hotbed of, racism, prejudice, and because I've lived up here, I've put that aside. I just now finished my bachelor's from National American University. So I'm also working on my master's, business administration. So I know you've probably seen me on billboards. I'm one of the role models. I lead by example, and I used my story to tell the youth in these communities, there's only one way that we can fix a lot of the, the pre-existing conditions in these communities. And that pipeline, that mining exploration is it's brought a lot of, division to a community that was, I look at it like repatriation. We were refugees for 500 years. The government has taken us from our environment up there, where we sweat lodge, Vision Quest, Sundance. And so it's really important to our people to have this communication, this network with the city of Rapid City and surrounding tribes and communities to better that relationship. Because if the mining company is just going to come and explore it and tear it up and leave the land without reforesting, without doing the deforestation, is going to have a long-term effect. I have other friends that are coming. They do environmental impact studies. So what they do is look at the conditions to the people as well. Under the Badman Clause, that is applicable here. So when you look at the situations that are harboring the native communities at arresting the communities by saying, "Oh, you're native. You can't do this. You can't do that." I use my story because it's an inspiration to the community, the youth. I have a lot of followers, non-native and native. So, and it's about returning the land to its pristine condition. So if you can work with the tribes and with the people in this community that are concerned, I appreciate that.
Thanks, Royce.
Yep, have a good one. Thank you.
Alex?
Royce.
Hi there. I'd like to give my time to Ben Rod, Rosebud Tippa.
Okay, could you identify yourself again for the record?
Alex Good Cane Milk.
Good afternoon, Commissioners.
I just need you to identify yourself.
Ben Rod, Rosebud Sioux Tribe, Historic Preservation Officer. Several months ago, I talked with the original Craig Bobzian, if I could ever say his last name right, who was the superintendent of the Black Hills National Forest. When I first talked with him about this, my concerns about this gold mine that was coming into the Black Hills, and another issue, another project also. What I asked him, what was he going to assess effects under? And particularly the Section 106 that I was looking for him to say. He didn't say it. The requirements that are under Section 106 is that there would be, from the government to government, consultation that should take place between ourselves and any entity of the United States government, Forest Service, Bureau of Land Management, Fish and Wildlife, Federal Highways, whatever. And I asked him, are you going to have consultation? He said no. And I looked at him strangely and I said, why? Because he said, we are officially saying this is a CADEX, which is a categorical exclusion, which is used in particular cases by the federal or by the Forest Service on areas that are not going to be very large in acreage. This is something we never agreed to. This is something the tribes never had any input into, such a handbook, federal handbook process or protocol. So what that means is that it was going to be less than 5 acres of impact. I said 5 acres is still 5 acres. It doesn't matter. There's going to be a direct either impact from either machinery and or direct drilling, whatever that may be used to perform this exploratory part of the project. And so I told him, I said, you will be receiving a letter from us, and we sent one with our tribal chairman, Willie Kendall's name on it, to him, saying that we wanted consultation. So the fiduciary duty that should have been and protocol that should have been followed was not followed by the United States Forest Service. These are upon those lands that, of course, that they administer. I cannot talk directly to the private lands, but I can to the federal, because my job is part of that process when there is disturbance of any kind at whatever level. If you have a 4-inch drill bore, it's a 4-inch drill bore. It's still going to destroy something. And so now that has evolved into a new superintendent. Mr. Babzian is no longer there. And I said again, told him again, that superintendent, we will be wanting consultation. Didn't happen. So there has been issues that we have tried to raise continuously with the Forest Service, from our councils, from my office, Historic Preservation Office, and nothing has came from it. So we will be pursuing this from our tribe. You have a resolution from our tribe, from the Rosebud Council, and I'm sure that there will be other documentation and letters will be sent. So with that, thank you.
Thanks, Ben.
That's it.
Yep.
You guys want to? Okay, we've got. You want to go ahead and roll? Go ahead.
Hello, my name is Philip Little Thunder Sr. I'm a Rosebud Sioux tribal member, seasonal worker for Tribal Historic Preservation Office. My boss just spoke. I'm a concerned tribal member and a concerned human being for what is happening up in the Black Hills. Taking resources out of our grandmother Earth, Ochimaka, we call her. As many of you remember, a few years there was a big flood through here, and that's all happening all over the place because for profit, for money, people are taking things from the earth that is destroying the earth, making it weaker. She's getting older faster than she's supposed to be. And things are happening out in the weather patterns that is unexplainable, for these winter storms, below zero weathers. And, things like this are happening. Gold, oil, my main concern, the water is going to be destroyed. They think it's nothing's happening up there, but it's going to affect the city of Rapid City pretty soon. And our neighbors, Pine Ridge Reservation, all over this land. And the people that are doing it, they're going to go back up north or go back across the ocean. And we're going to be sitting here in the United States with a devastated landmass because of resources that they took. I've already seen it happen. I lived in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area for 16 years, and I seen the bridge go down because of lumber that was cut up north. So that's what's gonna happen up here. But I don't know much about the legal matters and stuff my boss and them do. I'm just a common worker, common man. But I have concerns for my grandchildren and future generations that are going to come inhabit Rapid City or the tribes, the reservations that, we should leave what's in there so that Earth can survive longer. Whatever they're taking is just for green, money. On that money, it says my father passed away a long time ago, but he told me. He said, on there it says, "In God we trust." And up till today, I still remember that. It's a necessity in life, but it's not the ultimate goal. My father told me that. So that's what this drilling is about. And so, but I want to thank everybody for hearing me out and, concern for this planet that we live on. They've already taken gold out of there, taking some more drilling. It's going to hurt the earth. And we don't know what's up ahead. So I want to thank everybody here and the commissioners to rethink about giving permits to people from other countries coming here.
Thank you, Philip.
Thank you.
That. With that, I think we're going to proceed with the work session. We're going to start working through the ordinance again, just like we did the last time for most of you guys that have been here. We'll start going page by page. If you guys remember from our last meeting, we had directed some staff to make some changes and bring back those, and I think you've gotten some of those, and we've gotten some feedback from that. So I think what I'll do is we'll start off with page 1, and I think Michelle had made some changes on that. Or Brittany, could you explain?
Good evening, Brittany Molitor, Environmental Planning Supervisor. When legal and I were looking through the ordinance and we were looking at under the permitted uses, we kind of came to the conclusion that because you needed a permit to actually do the use, that it actually wasn't a permitted use, no longer. So then we moved it into the conditional uses. Under the statute, conditional use is defined as any use that, owing to certain special characteristics attendant to its operation, may be permitted in a zoning district subject to the evaluation and approval by the approving authority specified in 11-17.3. So we felt because of that it needed to be moved into a conditional use, not necessarily needing a conditional use permit. You would still need a mining permit, but it is a conditional use and not a permitted use.
So Brittany, should we actually be looking at 1 and 2 because they're going together?
In both districts.
Commissioners got that 1 and 2. So now we want to go to page 2, part C.
So it would move from under 205B17 to 205C31, and then move from 212B12 to 212C4.
Okay.
So Chairman.
Do the commissioners have any questions? Ms. Hadcock?
Yes, so Brittany, we had discussed yesterday about a conditional use permit and conditional uses, so people aren't confused like I was. Meaning, do I have to go through another process? Do I have to get a conditional use permit? That kind of thing, because anytime I always heard conditional use, it mean permit. And so a mining company wouldn't have to go through, basically, we're calling this mining ordinance a conditional use, not a CUP, which is conditional use permit process.
Right, our office typically does what we call a conditional use permit for uses that have specific criteria in the ordinance. So with the section 320 and same with like vacation home rentals and guest houses, we have specific criteria to those conditional uses that are applied. So they wouldn't, like in this case, it would go under the 320, the mining permit, because that is very specific to that type of use. It's still a conditional use, but it's specific to that conditional use. All other ones that don't have specific criteria would just fall under the regular conditional use permits with the other 5 criteria.
I have a follow-up, please. Thank you, sir. So we had also discussed that if you had this under conditional use, then we'd go back to the planning commission as a final say, and it'd have to go to appeal. I know Michelle had talked to me, because then I, of course, wasn't in agreement with where we were going. But there's been more discussion on that. So can we explain that? Because most of the time, for the public, conditional use permits, you need to go, and they are final through a planning commission decision, and we'd be right back to where we were if we put it under conditional uses. So now we've came up with something that is not the position in this mining ordinance. Am I correct, Ms. Michelle?
Michelle Hoffman.
Michelle Hoffman, State's Attorney's Office. I think the concern was if this was listed as it actually is a conditional use, that Section 510 would be applicable as well as that process. That is not the case. This mining section, Section 320, is very specific to mining and the concerns that mining operation generates. And under SDCL 11-217.5, it is our opinion that this board has the authority to set a different process in terms of evaluation and issuing a permit. And just for clarification, the mining permit is essentially a conditional use permit. So to be very clear, you just need a mining permit. And that's why the language specifically says mining provided a mining permit is obtained in accordance with Section 320, period.
Okay. Did everybody understand what she just said?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. DeSanto?
Question for either Michelle or Brittany. With that in mind, the comment that Mr. Dean made earlier under 205B, page 1, general agriculture permit uses allow mining, and therefore, why is a conditional use permit needed if that's the case?
That's what we're addressing currently.
Okay.
It's under an allowed use. But if it's an allowed use, you don't need a permit.
Okay.
And that's why it's being moved to conditional use, because you are required to have a permit to mine, whether it's general agricultural or heavy industrial, under 320.
Thanks for that clarification.
More follow-up?
No.
George?
First, what was that statute? 11-2- what?
17-5.
Oh, 11-2-17.5.
Thank you. Now, providing a mining permit is obtained. So,
Could you put your mic down?
do I have to obtain a mining permit before I come back in and ask for a conditional use permit?
You don't need a conditional use permit. It's just being listed as a conditional use that will require a mining permit under Section 320. See, mining is very different than if I want a conditional use so that I can operate a commercial business out of my garage.
Gotcha.
That only affects maybe my neighbors. Mining potentially impacts the community in its entirety, and that's why mining is being treated specially, thus Section 320.
Mr. Chair, isn't there a section on how to proceed with a conditional use permit, how to obtain a conditional use permit?
Yes, Section 510, but what you need to understand is we're creating a different process for mining, and it's not going to be addressed under Section 510, it's going to be addressed under 320. It's a conditional use that's going to require a mining permit.
Yeah.
Other conditional uses may require a conditional use permit, but in this case, it's a conditional use that's going to require a mining permit, and that's why it specifically refers to Section 320.
So there'll be a qualifying language so that the novice doesn't understand that, like all of us understand now about 320. But 5 years from now, somebody looks at conditional use permit, and then they go back here to 510 and look at a conditional use process. So to me, it's confusing, and I'm opposed.
Mr. Busker, do you have any comments on 1 and 2?
The only comment I would have is on my copy that I have, under Section 205B-17, that should be X'd out, right?
Yes.
That's no longer going to be in there.
Yes.
Okay. Otherwise, I think I agree with Michelle. She was kind enough to text me that statute, and I believe that we can because of the language, I think we can develop a different procedure than normally for a conditional use permit, which I know I kind of agree with George, it's kind of confusing, but I think I understand it.
And I would say that, our ordinances are going to be revamped in its entirety. This is just the first step. We're trying to make sure we get 320 right. And again, if you look at the language, it's saying it's a conditional use that requires a mining permit, period. And we'll certainly attempt to clarify with regards to your generic conditional uses as we revamp the ordinances.
Thank you, Michelle. Hancock, did you have a comment?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So basically, George, they're going to separate them because that was the big discussion with me yesterday, the exact thing you're saying. So they're going to separate them so people, when they go through the new ordinance book, remember, because we're doing a new comprehensive plan, that they separate those out so they know the difference. Because again, number one, I thought we had to go through another process, just like Mr. Dean said. They have to pay another fee, and then they have to go through, again, a conditional use permit and a mining permit. Basically, it's a condition, get the use out of it, even though it's a use. It's a condition under those uses, but it's not a conditional use permit, which sometimes sounds confusing, but they need to separate those papers in that ordinance, which they will when they make the new comprehensive plan, so it's not hopefully confusing for the public or us in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Hancock.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. DeSanto.
That being said, Deb, it will not require an additional payment or an additional fee. Is
No.
that correct? Okay, thank you.
With that, I would look,
Chair, I got-
Mr. Fairby.
So what are we going to do with permitted use under general ag, number 13, temporary quarries? What are we going to do with that one?
What page you on?
Well, I'm in the planning.
Oh, you're in the
I'm in
planning.
the big blue book. Condition number 13, permitted use, temporary quarries. How does that fit? Anyway, that aside, I know we're getting confusing, but government's supposed to be citizen-friendly. The more rules, the more regulations, the more twists and turns, the more hoops, the more barriers, whatever you want to say, the less customer-friendly, citizen-friendly government is. This is very, very taxpayer, citizen unfriendly. Thank you.
I think they're working on that, George, so I think they took your point. So brings us back to 1 and 2. There were some minor changes. I would look for a motion for approval or denial or more motions on pages 1 and 2.
Make a motion to approve on page 1 and 2 the changes.
Chair.
There's been a motion on the floor. A second for discussion.
No, I want to add something.
I've got no second. Second by Ron Buskard, motion made by Hancock, seconded by Buskard. For discussion, Mr. DeSanto.
Mr. Chair, I would like to see added to section 320, mining operations, change A to B and C to D, or no, excuse me, change A to B and B to C, and add in, because I think this would clarify things, section A, permitting authority, and under that, the Pennington County Board of Commissioners retains permitting authority for all permits required by that section of the Pennington County zoning ordinance, or renewal thereof, and transfers. I would like that to be included. Further, stop work orders shall be approved by Pennington County Board of Commissioners. I think that would clarify that we are the final decision makers on both permits and renewals.
Discussion, I think, didn't we address that on page 5 and 6? We are the final.
I don't think they addressed it in page 5.
Chairman,
On renewals. I didn't
do you have that written somewhere?
get that.
Do you have that written somewhere, Mark?
Right here.
No, did you send it to us or anything?
No, I just thought of it today.
I've
been studying and reading, and I think
It's hard to go there, Commissioner DeSanto, because I have no idea what you just said. I mean, I understand kind of where you're going from what you said, your basic.
Well,
my basic gist is, pardon me.
Could we, approve this and get that written, and then we'll do second reading, we could
Add that to
add
it.
that to it. So then we could at least get with state's attorneys and have a good discussion on it and make sense.
I could be agreeable to that.
Thank you.
Because I think you have some good wordage in there. I just like to, I think we can get confused by moving stuff around today. And
Okay.
And Chairman,
Mrs. Hadcock.
I agree with you because I think we have some of that verbiage in there and we can discuss that, the board and the staff with Mark to make sure some of that verbiage it sounds like it's already in here, so he knows where to find it. And bottom line, you're right. This isn't going to be second reading today. We cannot approve second reading till Tuesday, so we have time, Mark. if
That'd
that's
give
okay.
us the weekend to kind of review it.
Yes, sir. So I agree with you.
Well, now you know.
Okay.
I appreciate that, Mark. So we have a motion on the floor that was first made by Hadcock, seconded by Ron, under the understanding that Mark's going to have some reverbiage, and we're going to revisit this on Tuesday. Everybody's okay with that?
We should ask the public if they want to talk on their motion.
Well, we did public comment, and we're going to, I believe at the end of this, we'll take some more discussion on some of the changes, but I think we need to get through the changes and give them a chance to digest what's going on, and then we can address it.
Mr. Chair, we've made a motion and got a second, so we should let the public comment before we vote on the motion.
Chairman?
Ms. Hadcock.
Yes, we're just working through this document today, and then if we have more public comment, you can see where we're going. And then after that, guys, we still have another meeting. So I think if you start having people comment on everything we do again, we're going to be here another 6 hours. Not that we don't want to hear from the public, but these are the changes we made, and then the public actually will know if we're actually going to keep these changes or not, and then discuss them afterwards or be on the second reading. So I always like public comment, and I believe this commission does, but at this point, I think we need to get through the document on the changes we made, and then we'll still have more time for public comment tonight.
Mr. DeSanto, do you have any comment? No. As I said, we're going to go through this, and we're going to have a board. We're going to be asking lawyers up here throughout this conversation and some experts, because we're going to need that to thumb through this. So from my understanding, we're going to move forward. So with that.
Mr. Chair, I object, so I'll abstain until I get the public input on this matter of motion.
That's your choice, Mr. Farabee. So with that, we'll take a roll call vote, please.
Buskerud?
Aye.
DeSanto?
Yes.
Farabee, you're abstaining?
Abstain.
Hadcock?
Aye.
And LaCroix?
Aye. Motion passes with one abstention from Mr. Farabee. So that moves us to page 3. Does anybody see anything on page 3 that they need to, 3 or, let's do 3 and 4.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. DeSanto.
I'm concerned about the definition abandonment and how it might affect our county highway pits. Because from what I understand, quite often, we might dig from one of those pits 1 year to pave a road nearby and then not touch that pit again for 10 years. How will this affect our county highway pits?
I would look, Tom, would you like to reply to that?
Tom Wilsey, Highway Department. Yeah, we've got pits that we go in, mine, put up maybe 30, 40,000 tons of gravel, haul, say we put it up 40 and we haul 25 out. It might be 8 years before we go in and get the other 15,000 out. The way I'm reading this, we would have to resubmit when we want to go in and mine more. Otherwise, it's just a stockpile location. So I figured anything over 5 years, we will probably have to reapply or ask for renewal.
Right.
Okay.
And I assume that's the way I'm reading it,
Just like the mining companies.
just like a mining company, yes.
Michelle, is that correct?
Michelle Hoffman, State's Attorney's Office, and I'll invite Ms. Molitor or Mr. Conover to add their opinions, but I do not believe that's the case. If you turn to page 16 of 20, we have a specific provision M, which talks about abandonment of mining operations, which states that temporary cessation will not qualify as an abandonment. We do understand that there are times where depending on the demands of the market, there may not be activity. So the bottom line is the intent. So no, the fact that it's idle for 6 months, 9 months, even a year does not mean it's abandoned.
I think he was talking 5 years.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'm concerned because, like Tom said, some of these pits sit with nothing going on for 5, 8 years. And
Yes.
This says that discontinuance of a use for a continuous period of 1 year. So,
Where,
under the description of abandonment, without reference to intent. So would that just mean that the highway department's got to come in and tell PJ every year, we're still going to use that pit?
That's essentially the way that I read this, and you can't govern by definition, but both in this definition, it says an intentional and absolute relinquishment and cessation of use for any period of time without intention to resume. So give the intention to resume, then not a worry. And said use or the voluntary discontinuance of a use for a continuous period of time without reference to content. So I would echo exactly what you said, Commissioner DeSanto. As long as they're letting us know their intent, they'll be okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. There's a lot of technical stuff in here that you have to follow through to get into, and I appreciate you guys' help.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Farabee.
in the real world, let's say that 5 years go by and highway decides to gravel a road out in Caputa area or Creighton or wherever, and they go to an old gravel pit and start crushing and hauling. What are the consequences?
I think they just explained that they can go back as long as they had the intent of keeping that open. They explained that.
Mr. Chair, so how do they express the intent? Do they put a big sign up on the wall someplace here? Our intent is to go out to Caputa and we'll wait 10 years until we re-gravel again? To me, this is crazy.
Ms. Hoffman.
Michelle Hoffman, State's Attorney's Office, under the law, it wouldn't just be a matter of the Highway Department stepping up and saying, this is our intent. You can establish your intent to continue operations through all sorts of objective criteria. Maybe you're stockpiling existing aggregate on that land. That would establish intent that you continue to intend to use that property. So again, as Mr. Conover stated, we don't legislate through a definition, and certainly you would look at all the facts and circumstances to determine whether there was an intent to abandon.
Thank you, Michelle. All right, with that, we're looking at page 3, M4. I would look for a motion on 3 and 4.
Mr. Chair, if we're still on definitions, I've got a question about personal
Are you going to
use.
vote
Are we still on definitions?
on page 3?
Page 3 and 4 are definitions.
Are you abstaining or are you voting on this?
I want a definition. I want an explanation of a definition.
Well, if you abstain from it, then do you get a vote on the definition?
Ms. Hadcock. Got a point.
You're not going to vote on it anyway.
Do I have
Okay,
the floor?
okay.
Do I have the floor? Or does
Ask your
does
question.
Hadcock have the floor?
Ask your question, Mr. Farabee.
Personal use, extraction and use by property owner for non-commercial purposes. Where is non-commercial defined? And what is non-commercial? Commercial. Illustration.
Brittany or PJ want to take that on?
Commercial sales are defined, so anything that's like sold for profit. So personal use, typically what happens is they use it on their property, especially in the eastern part of the county, they'll dredge it or dredge areas, build stock ponds, use it on their own property, but they don't use it for profit. They don't sell it to anybody.
Thank you, Brittany. With that, we're going to move on.
Mr. Chair, if I might.
No. If you've asked your question, one more question, and then
So let's say
I'm going to yield to Mr. DeSantos.
let's say I'm a rancher east of town and I've got a bit of gravel and I sell some to you. Is that commercial or not? Or I trade for a cow or a whatever. Is that commercial?
It's bartering.
I don't want the government coming after people for that kind of neighborly activity. Thank you.
With that, we'll move on. Item, page 3 and 4.
Personal use.
I'd like to, is there a motion to approve pages 3 and 4?
Yes, so moved.
Second.
Moved by Buschrood, seconded by Hadcock. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chair,
Mr. DeSanto.
I think for just maybe to calm George's concern, I think under commercial sales, George, it says done or acting with sole or chief emphasis on saleability, profit, or success. So I think that covers that if you trade a guy a pickup load of gravel out of your pit for 12 ton of hay or 2 ton of hay or whatever, I don't think that is done with a chief emphasis or sole emphasis on saleability, profit, or success.
That's a good point.
So I don't think anybody's going to get in trouble for, I would hope not anyway.
Good point, Mr. DeSanto.
Chairman,
Ms. Hadcock.
I believe if personal use is the definition, personal use and non-commercial purposes, I would hope that would be a clear understanding of what that means.
Okay, thank you. So we have a motion on the floor made by Mr. Buschrood and seconded by Hadcock to approve page 3 and 4. Further discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote.
Buschrood,
Aye.
DeSanto,
Aye.
Farabee,
No.
Hadcock,
Aye.
LaCroy.
Aye. Thank you. Next, we'll move on to page 5. We've got some adjustments that were on there, and I think some questions from some people on page 5. Mining permit process and public notice requirements. Would anybody like to give a brief on page 5? Brittany?
There was just a comment in there, because Commissioner Buschrood had spoke that he was going to address the half-a-mile requirement at the next meeting. And then we did add, the applicant shall also notify Tribal Historic Preservation Officer for each of the tribes listed in the Black Hills National Forest Tribal THPO current mailing list. And that list is actually compiled and put together and given to the applicant by our assistant in our office, Jerry, here. So as long as they keep that updated with our office, so that would be their responsibility, but she would provide that information to the applicants or the owners of the operators. And then we did add under number 2, public hearing, because when the Planning Commission does make recommendations, they have also that they can recommend denial or denial without prejudice. So that
Okay.
was added.
I see that. And also under 3, mining permit application reviews, you have a few changes there.
Correct, because the Planning Commission and the Board of Commissioners, instead of saying both entities are looking at it, it's just all relevant information may be considered. It's just a blanket statement instead of saying the Planning Commission and the Board of Commissioners, because obviously in your guys' determination and the Planning Commissions, you guys would both be able to look at all relevant information to consider the application.
Okay.
So we just simplified that sentence.
Thanks, Brittany. With that, I'm going to go to Ron, because this was one of Ron's concerns from our last meeting. Do you have any comment on this, Ron?
Yeah, I do. Thank you. I've had some comments from some citizens about both ways on this. I still am firmly believing that a half mile is not outrageous. If you're going to have a mining operation next to a town, a half mile will include quite a few people. But if you're going to have a mining operation next to a town, it's going to affect a lot of people. And if you're going to have a mining operation out in the rural areas, half a mile isn't going to make much difference in how many people you're going to have to notify, because generally speaking, probably be sparsely populated unless it's next to a development, which they should all be notified anyway. So I guess I still believe it should be a half mile.
So is that a motion with the changes?
It is. It's a motion to change E1, where it says the applicant shall notify all property owners, including recorded contract for deed buyers of land located within 1/2 mile.
With
That's
the
fine.
additional changes on the page?
Yeah, if you want to do them all, sure. I have no problem with the rest of the changes. I would accept 5 with, approve 5 with the change of half mile instead of 500 feet.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by DeSanto. Discussion from the board. No discussion from the board.
Just one
Would
thing,
you like-
Chairman. Sorry.
No, go ahead. Ms. Hack.
To make sure that the change with the applicant shall notify tribal historic preservation, which is THIPO, that's in accordance with the applicant shall send the notices by certified mail with return receipt requested at least 30 days. So that was a change that was made from listening to some of the public comment that we made or heard from the public. So, and I'm guessing the THIPO, if I'm correct, Ben, is the 16 tribes, is THIPO Historic Preservation. Am I correct, sir? Thank you.
Okay. And take note that we get through this, if there's some hot stuff that a person who's been working on this, I think we'll take comment again, if the board's okay with that. I think we're going to do that at the end, to do another review with some of the changes, so we're prepared for next Monday.
Mr. Chair,
Only fair.
Mr. DeSanto.
just for clarification, the applicant shall also notify the Tribal Historic Preservation Office for each of the tribes listed on the Black Hills National Forest Tribal current mailing list. That's the applicant's responsibility, not the county's responsibility. Am I correct?
Right. But we'll have a
Applicant
list.
for the mining permit.
We'll recognize PJ for the.
Yeah, Peter, kind of a director of planning, but we'll assist with that list for them with the letters that we give them and the addresses. That list is easy to access, and just like we do with all the other hearing letters we mail out, we provide the names and the addresses and the letters. It's all included in the cost of the permit. And then they have to physically go and mail the letter, certified return receipt, and bring the slips back to us, proving that they mailed them.
Okay.
And that's all they have to do. You can't guarantee they're going to be picked up from the recipient, but the applicant has to do their due diligence to mail them appropriately.
Okay, Mr. Chair.
Mr. DeSanto.
So does that address Mr. Dean's question that the U.S. Forest Service, if the mining is going to be happening on the U.S. Forest Service land, that they've already, are we doubling up? U.S. Forest Service is supposed to have already notified.
I'm not aware if it's specifically doubling up, but I do believe that this was added as of a comment from last meeting, just as an extra step. And I believe that there was a federal law that was stated, but I haven't been able to look that up or verify that.
Thank you.
Chairman.
Mrs. Hadcock.
So if they already have done it and they've notified the tribes, I don't know, Ben, can you come up?
Should the applicant be
Sir,
responsible to do it?
do you know, my question is, do you know if you guys get by certified mail or how they do the notification through the game fishing parks?
Yeah, we receive,
Ben,
sorry,
I just need you to-
Ben Rod.
There you go.
Rosebud Trip, THPO. We receive, oh God, 20 letters a week for notifications of projects. I just returned from my colleague standing back there by me, Mr. Vance, Bonnie St. John out in Oahu. We just returned from a dealing with 5,000 oil wells in western Wyoming. We've been in 4-day meetings. We receive many notices of intent on these projects that are occurring, and I mentioned those federal agencies earlier. And but whenever something is initiated, and we receive a letter from the federal agency, it will give a date of April 2nd, April 30th, or whatever. And it's always good if the proponent would notify us of their intent to start. This is what we're dealing with wind farms right now. We're dealing with pipelines throughout the northern plains and into the eastern woodlands.
So Ben,
So,
not to interrupt you, but
Yeah.
so what we're trying to do is we're asking you, Ben, is it going to be double up? The applicant shall notify the tribal historic preservation. Are we doing it right if
You're doing it
through the
right.
certified mail? And is that different than how you do it with all the letters and things that you have now?
No, with
What's the difference?
certified mail, when we get that, we know that that's priority.
Okay.
And we need to deal with it.
All right.
Mr. Chair.
All right.
Thanks, Ben.
Thank you.
Question
Mr.
for-
DeSanto.
Ben, I got a question for
Ben.
you.
Ben.
Hey, Ben. That's okay.
Yeah.
I guess what I'm trying to clarify is, if the U.S. Forest Service has already notified you,
Right.
do we need to require the applicant
Yeah.
to notify you as well?
When they're initiating their start. Because, like I said, it may be April 2nd, it may be May 15th. We'll get that notice from the Forest Service, and they'll say that this action is to start on such and such a time, at such and such a day. But when and then the applicants, the proponents, whenever they are beginning to notify, and they're going to notify us, then we're aware. Because we get calls from our peoples, we get calls from others that have concerns about a project's impact to a local area. You're talking about neighbors. And we get calls. And if I'm sitting there saying, well, wait a minute, I got to go back and look up, when is it? And I'm on the phone right then. Well, then, if an action has started and the proponent has sent us a letter, then I can very quickly say, yes, we have the letter. We know that that's occurring over there. So
Thank you, sir.
it helps us.
Thanks, Ben.
Mr. Chair.
Hold on. PJ's got some clarification, I think.
Yeah, I think an important thing to notice is the notices that they'll probably get from the federal lands is going to be about the federal land permit. The one that they'll send out from us, the notice of hearing, is specific to what the county is involved with and doing with the specific permit. So it'll mention what the requested use is and the date of the hearing at Pennington County.
There you go.
So it'll be specific to what we're doing at that time, which would be different than what the federal letters would
The
say.
first one. Thanks, PJ. Mr. Farabee.
I think Mr. Rod we're talking two different issues. I understand you're concerned about the start of actually doing some work. But this notice is for the application for a permit. And that could be 6 months, a year before any dirt starts rolling or whatever. So I disagree that, I think with Mr. Dean, I think we ought to qualify this to say notification, the applicant should notify those folks on private ground and only private ground. So let's modify that addition. The Forest Service already, according to Mr. Rod, does notify the folks if there's an application, so let's make it private ground only.
I don't hear, that was a motion, right? Substitute motion?
Well, it is, we're not supposed to talk before we make the motion, but I'll make the motion to change that change to qualify it to private ground only. privately held property only.
I think I agree. I will second that.
And that's with the approval of the,
Just for the approval of the permit, not,
but the motion on the floor already is to approve the half mile, and the changes already, you're adding, are you guys okay with that, just adding additional? Is that what you want to do, or you want to vote on this separately?
no, I'm fine with adding it.
Chairman, can I have an explanation?
Ms. Hadcock.
So we're taking out the HIPAA clause, or that, because you think they're already notified through the federal? And PJ, you just stated that it's a whole different process, because the federal, once you get to the county, is you're getting application. So what they're saying is communication through both sides, not just one.
Yeah, I'm just saying our notice of hearing letters will be about the application applied for with the county.
Right.
And it would be specific information about the counties, the application submitted to the county with the meeting time. That's the notice of hearing at the county, different than what the federal letters may say.
Okay.
So a half a mile, so somebody explain this. So a half mile around this perimeter, we believe that, so we're, okay, tell me again, are we taking out the applicant, George, you're saying to take out the THPO process or to add private with it?
To qualify that sentence, Mr. Chair, qualify that sentence with private ground. Illustration, if Mr. Dean wants to come to my place and do some mining, he's going to have to notify the Tribal Historical Preservation Officer. If it's on the Forest Service next to me, he doesn't have to.
So.
Forest Service already notifies.
Because the Forest Service is already letting them know about the application.
Tanya?
Ben's talking about something different. Mr. Chair, may I speak?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I didn't.
Hold on, we're
Ben's
trying to
actu-
work through this real quick.
Ben's actually talking about that now this applicant that wants to mine, he's already obtained the permit. The applicant or the USGS, or U.S. Forest Service, has notified the THPO of the application. Ben is wanting the applicant, which is not between us, to then notify the THPO of when they're going to start. Like George said, they could have that application for months.
It's two different things, because one's federal, one's county, but.
Did you want someone to talk?
Chairman, if we could have Tanya, she's the one that brought this forward to us, so if Tanya, you could explain what, and I'm getting it, but explain to these guys a couple of those things.
Tanya, Ms. Hadcock
Okay.
requested you to speak.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Hancock. My name is Tanya Stans, and I'm an Oglala Sioux tribal member. What I want to clarify is that, okay, we're looking at in particular, sacred site. You know, it could be an area of a mining permit. So say that area, like take this table, half of it is on Forest Service land, this side is on private land. It doesn't exempt anybody on private land because that whole area is still sacred. So that's what we're saying, the county has to notify the THPOs, because to each tribe, they have to respond on a tribal level. And dealing with the Black Hills, because the Black Hills is large and Pennington County is in there, that's what we're addressing. So these mining permits, whether they're sand, hard rock, gravel, they have to go through tribal consultation, because we're the ones that can identify the archaeological finds in there.
So,
This
Ms.
is our
Tanya,
sacred site.
I'm listening, so what I'm saying is, they're saying that on game fish and parkland, that other half that you were talking about, it's already been notified through the federal government. The county shouldn't have to do that because they already followed the process. Then, if we go onto the private land, the other side, that's where George is saying that it should be notified. Does that make sense? They're saying the two pieces of ground, one's game, fish and park, that's federal. You guys should have already been notified through that process of certification. I don't know if they certified letters, but they should have already done that for you. And then if we go onto private land, which is the other side of that sacred land, that should go through the county. Does that make sense? So if you've already been notified in the Game Fish and Park, what I thought was that you wanted not only Game Fish and Park, but if they already did it, this was my thinking, and maybe I'm wrong, that you already notified Game Fish and Park, but the tribes wanted it done through the county because through the Game Fish and Park and through the federal level and the state level, it wasn't happening. So am I misunderstood on what they're saying? Because if you're already notified through the federal, what George sounds like that's right. You're already notified through the federal part of it, through Game Fish and Parks, but you're on private land, it's different.
Or we're getting too many people just walking up here.
I want to clarify.
Nancy?
No.
State agency.
It's Forest
Forest
Service.
Service is a federal agency. The federal agencies do things that the feds own public land. State, counties, and towns own public land. And state, counties, and towns are not governed by federal law about notifying tribes. So there's public federal land, there's public non-federal land, and then there's private land.
So Nancy,
Three classes.
Nancy, stay.
Exactly.
Sorry, Chairman, just for a second.
Let me,
I need to ask her something.
quick question.
So should we have to, through the county, because it's a whole different process, should we have to have THPO through the county certified letters sent, as Tanya said, through the state side as well as the private, or should
Yes.
it just be private?
I'm not,
Yes.
I'm not an expert on
Yes, that's
federal,
what the law
private.
says.
Hold on, Tanya.
But what I'm saying is you're mixing, there's three classes of things here. There's the federals, public land, there's non-federal public land, and then there's private land. And the federal government will have laws that apply to federal land, but do not apply to Game Fish and Parks, which is a state agency, okay?
So it should be, so we should keep the THPO in there because of, it's a whole different ballgame.
Okay.
The feds are not inviting
Okay,
them
we
to
need-
come to a hearing
She's
about.
cutting me off.
Okay, folks, it's,
I just want to finish my clarification on this. So regardless of county, state, and federal, you have to come to the tribes because this is our sacred land. So the permit that they're applying to, they have to consult with us and let us know. It doesn't matter. Federal,
Okay.
state,
all
and
right.
county.
Okay, thanks, Tanya. George, did you have a follow-up on,
Just real simply, if Mr. Dean comes to my place, then he's gonna have to notify the tribal historical preservation officers. But if it's Forest Service, then what he's saying is the Forest Service has that obligation. So let's qualify this so there's not double up. So just say it's on private ground.
I think what we're gonna do with this is we're gonna separate this page 5. So, is that okay with the motion makers and the seconder? I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I'm the motion maker, and I would object to combining them. I think if they want to make that separate motion, fine.
Okay.
But I want my motion separate.
Thank you, Ron. I got some clarification from PJ.
I just want to remind you again, these are notice of hearing letters for the county. So if another agency sends out information to THPO or anybody else, it won't have our hearing dates in it. It won't have our time, our location.
No.
These are simply a notification of hearing letter about an application received, and staff is in support of keeping this in.
Thank you, PJ. Thanks for the clarification. So the motion maker wanted them separated. Is that okay with the seconder also? You were the seconder on, or was that?
They did a substitute, I think.
They did a substitute, but the original motion, he was to add it onto the motion, so he's wanting them separated.
DeSanto was the
Mark was the, or does the seconder want to withdraw?
I'll withdraw having it combined, and we'll address it under something.
Okay.
Substitute motion for a.
Okay, so the first,
So we'll vote on Ron's 0.5 mile.
yeah, his half mile and the changes on page 5, as stated.
So we're voting on just the
Yes.
half mile,
Just the half mile and the changes that they've made
the sentence.
in
Page
red.
5. Okay. Got it. Buskirk,
Aye.
DeSanto,
Aye.
Farabee,
Yes.
Hadcock. Aye. And LaCroy.
Aye. Now we'll go to the discussion on that notice. Did you guys want to make?
The substitute motion still stands. We didn't vote on the substitute motion.
Okay, repeat your motion, please.
To change this add-on, the applicant shall also notify so on and so forth, qualify that by saying if it's on private ground,
And
privately
then
held property.
you're the seconder, Mark, on that one?
Right.
So the motion's been made and seconded. Any
Chairman?
further, Ms. Hadcock?
Where's private ground going? One more time. Under what sentence in what paragraph and at the end or where?
The red edition on page 5 of 20, right below the 500 feet.
So we're keeping the THPO in there plus adding private ground.
We're qualifying that sentence to mean just on private held property.
Okay.
So in other words, after May.
Mr. DeSanto.
Sorry, Lloyd. In other words, the applicant shall also notify THPO in the case that they're planning to mine on private land.
Chairman,
Ms. Hadcock.
again, this is, you want to still do THPO, and if you want to add private, that's fine. But what PJ is trying to tell you is the hearing is separate than what you'd get from the game fish and park. So this would be a hearing to notify the tribes, would be a whole separate thing. When you go to the state and the federal, or whatever you want to call it, you're going to go and they're going to say they're going to be mining.
Right.
They're not going to say they're going to be mining on, and there's going to be a hearing in Pennington County on August 4th, 2014. That's what we do. So what we're saying is we're going to tell the tribes that we are going to have, through the certified letter, if I'm correct, a hearing, am I correct, PJ? A hearing on August 4th, 2016. That's the difference. We want the tribes to know that. It's different than, even if it's game fish and parks or it's state or federal, because if it's a hearing through Pennington County, it's a whole different ballgame. It's a different date, and those tribes can speak here as well, just so they're notified that they know this is here. If they don't, and again, it's not hard for our commission or our county to do that. Our planning department said that they're in favor of this, and it's for a hearing. And they already,
So in other words, the USGS is not notifying the tribe of the hearing date. That's what you're saying?
I don't know if they would even know about our date because it probably wasn't even applied for yet. If one of the governmental agencies is one of the property owners within 500 feet, that's one of the letters that has to be sent out letting them know that we have a hearing.
So to clarify, these two, the request to the USGS is not in conjunction with the request to the county.
Correct. May be included in the application packet that we receive, but they're separate.
He's actually given an actual date.
So they have to get two different.
And it kind of makes sense because the intent was to the USGS and then actual work, there's another notice in the hearing of it.
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
I'm gonna go to Ron first. He hasn't had a chance to speak. Ron, did you have any comment on this?
I've swung back and forth a couple of times. I guess I'm going to vote against it because of what PJ said, that it's a different notification, and I think we should notify him of the hearing date, and we're the only ones that know that. So.
Thanks, Ron. Mr. Farabee.
2 points. Number one, what does game fish and parks got to do with this?
Nothing.
Where did game fish and parks come into this? This is U.S. Forest Service. No. Second point is, Mr. Dean's not going to come to us for a mining permit on Forest Service. That's strictly aside from us. the only application he has to get, a permit he has to get from us is on private ground
Speaking to Mike.
from Pennington County. We don't have jurisdiction over the Forest Service.
Is that correct?
Why would he come to us for a Forest Service permit?
He's not.
No.
Right, Jim?
PJ,
Yeah, PJ Conover Director, there are times that the Forest Service makes it a condition to get a local jurisdiction permit. So there are times that it can be done.
It's true.
And then they'll notify everybody. But
I think this is one of the details that need to be worked out as time goes on.
I agree.
he's received permits. Let him talk.
Hold on. Mr. Farabee, you asking for Mr. Dean?
He's been through this. Let him talk.
I'm asking you, do you want him to speak?
I do. Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
Mr. Dean.
I'd like Mr. Dean, somebody that's been
All
through
right,
this.
thank you.
to tell us.
That's all I'm asking.
Thank you.
Mr. Dean, could you, yep, he's asking you to clarify on that permit issue.
That's where my confusion was. I didn't think.
Yeah.
The reason why I was concerned about this is because usually when we've done our Forest Service work before we come to the county, otherwise there's no sense you coming here. Normally in the last ones, they've went to the tribes for consultation basically for the cultural studies of the property, and I don't have any problem with that, with the tribes wanting to do their own or counseling on that at all. I don't have a problem with any of that. It's just that if it's already been done and the tribes have already looked at it, they're through the Forest Service end of it. That's all I was trying to get at. But if they want to be notified with this, that's fine too. It's just the cultural, they want to come and check their culture, so that we'd be checking it twice, in my thinking. But that was all that the only point that I was trying to make with it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Dean.
So Chairman,
Mrs. Hadcock.
so if you already did it, it wouldn't be a problem
Well, that was
anyway,
the only
right?
thing that I was
gonna
bringing
say.
up, that if they've already been counsel on it. One other thing that I would like to add, I would like to see a date, if the tribes are invited to come in, which they are invited to come in to the public hearing, that at the end of that public hearing, then it's done. If they want to come in and do another archaeological study, that's fine. But then we set a date for the archaeological study, we get it done, and then it's done. And I think they would agree to that. But I would like to see, a date, say, okay, 30 days after the public hearing, they need to be done with their cultural study or have it planned when they're gonna do it, or whatever they need to be,
Okay.
whatever they wanna do,
Dean, I think,
so that we can end it.
I think we've identified some more work that needs to be done.
Yes,
So,
ma'am, Jim. I mean, like, Jim, when you find some place out on the federal ground that you want to mine,
Yeah.
do you come to us for a permit?
Well, I go there first because,
No, you come to us for a permit? the county?
yeah, oh, yeah, I do, yeah. Part of their,
On federal ground?
Yes.
oh, yeah. Part of their and part of the thing that I have to do with them, it's actually through the state that requires me to have a county permit. First the Forest Service, then the state, or you and the state together. So, yeah. So
All
the
right.
state actually requires me to have a permit from the county.
all right, thanks, Jim.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, I think we're ready to vote.
Got to vote on that substitute.
I think
Unless
we already
you rescind
voted,
it,
we
George.
voted,
Voted on everything but that one.
yeah, we voted, we made the vote on all the changes in the half mile. This is
Right.
on the substitute motion itself. Unless you guys want to withdraw it.
Is this on the substitute motion for the sentence, changing the words?
Private ground, yeah.
You want to stick with private ground?
This is on the substitute?
Yeah, this
Sir?
is on this is on the substitute motion,
Okay,
just switching it to private ground.
okay.
Further discussion, seeing none, roll call vote.
Buskerud?
No.
DeSanto?
No.
Farabee?
Yes.
Hadcock?
No.
LaCroy?
No. Okay. This is tougher than last time.
Oh, you're doing good.
Let's do,
6, 7, and 8.
take a look at Ron, take a look at 6, 7, and 8.
I'll make a motion to approve them.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to approve 6, 7, and 8. Michelle, did you have any discussions or problems with these?
Well, just question on the last motion. I know you defeated the substitute motion, but have you actually voted on a motion to approve the THPO language as?
We haven't.
I thought everything that was in red and the half mile, Ron had said to approve.
Well, you separated the half mile from the language, so you defeated the substitute motion, but I'm not sure you had a motion to actually approve the THPO language as it exists.
I thought it was clear when Ron made his motion to add the half mile and everything in red.
That was the intent of my motion.
Okay.
And when I asked about the first motion, I said the 500 feet to the half mile and the sentence.
So it was together. Okay,
That's what I had, and that's what I had asked.
Right. There's been a motion on this one, 6, 7, 8.
Once in a while, I do get it right. Sorry.
Good job.
Okay, so now we're at 6, 7, and 8. Any discussion we have a motion and a second to approve those?
No discussion.
No discussion, Mr. Farabee? Seeing none, we've got a motion for approval 6, 7, and 8 as written. All in favor indicate by saying aye and a roll call vote.
Buskerud?
Aye.
DeSanto?
Aye.
Farabee?
Yes.
Hadcock?
Aye.
LaCroy?
Aye. So that brings us to page 9, and let's, from the looks of it, 9, 10, 11, and 12. The only rework that we had was on 9 itself. So I would look for some discussion on, probably on 9, but approval for 9, 10, 11, 12.
Be my motion with the changes.
Give me a moment.
Second.
It was moved for approval of 9, 10, 11, and 12 with the changes on 9. There's the only real changes on 9.
Comparing to my
9,
notes.
10, 11, 12, all.
9, 10, 11, 12, yes.
Yes, sir.
And the changes are, they deleted to determined by the planning commission because of the previous stuff, language that was changed. And under G3, noise control, there was, in was scratched out and under was put in, section was cut out, and Pennington County ordinance was put in. Although those were the same as what we had.
Okay, I'm good.
Okay. So a motion was made by Busker, seconded by Hadcock to approve the changes on 9 and approve 10, 11, and 12 as written. Any further discussion? Roll call vote, please. All in favor indicate by aye.
Buskerud?
Aye.
DeSanto?
Aye.
Farabee?
Yes.
Hadcock?
Aye.
LaCroy?
Aye.
5 minutes.
You want to,
5 minutes.
The motion.
Make a motion for a 5-minute break.
Second?
it's been moved to take a 5-minute break, seconded by DeSanto. All in favor indicate by aye. Roll call vote.
Buskerud?
Aye.
DeSanto?
Aye.
Farabee?
Yes.
Hadcock?
Aye.
LaCroy?
Aye. Make sure everybody's out in the hallway here, so we're resuming. We're going to start on page 13. On page 13 alone, it looks like there was just a little bit of changing from Planning Commission from the previous changes. Under H dash, or item 2 under groundwater monitoring, the Board of Commissioners was replaced by the Planning Commission. So I would look for.
Move for approval.
Moved by DeSanto.
Second.
And seconded by Hadcock to approve page 13 with the changes. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Roll call vote.
Buskerud?
Aye.
DeSanto?
Aye.
Farabee?
Yes.
Hadcock?
Aye.
LaCroy?
Aye. Next, we come to page 14, and there looks like there was a paragraph changed under renewals, under J. Address in section 320J. And item B, 1B, the owner operator shall give notice of renewal in accordance with section 320-E-1. I'm down here underneath renewals, then they got it
Sorry,
down there
you're on
red.
A, B, C, D, E, or A, B, C, D.
Brittany, could you give any clarification on those, or you? There was some prior annually.
Sure. The reason that we struck a lot of that is because it was addressed, it actually had to do with revocation of a permit and the process to do that. So under the renewals, we didn't think it was appropriate in that section, so that's why it was struck out of there, and then it was addressed in section J.
Okay, so,
And then B was added based on public comment during the last meeting.
so B, yeah, I could see it used to be A, so now it's B, owner operator shall give notice of renewal in accordance with section 320-E-1.
Correct. And then there was some discussion during the last meeting about whether the planning director or the planning commissioner board of directors should be the one doing the renewal. So that's why that was in the sidebar, just as a talking point.
Okay. So, yeah, I think you're believing right. So that's why you got that highlighted as planning director. Should it be the planning commission or the board of commissioners?
I would move that we make it Board of Commissioners, which is included in that
Second.
additional stuff that I.
We got to speak into your.
Move that we would make that Board of Commissioners.
And that, folks, and that was a second by Hadcock. Ron, that's under I, B, the red highlight that says planning director. The motion is to change planning director to board of commissioners.
Yep, got it.
And everybody else is okay with the rest. Any discussion?
Move for approval.
It was moved by DeSanto and seconded by Hadcock to approve page 14 with the changes, with an additional change on IC, changing that from planning director to board of commissioners. All in favor indicate by saying aye and roll call vote.
Buskerud,
Aye.
DeSanto,
Aye.
Farabee,
Yes.
Hadcock,
Aye.
LaCroy.
Aye. So next, that moves us on to page 15. And as you can see, some of the numbers have changed because the stuff was added. And I would assume, since we changed planning director under IC, we'd change that under IF.
That would be my motion.
I'll refer to,
E or F? You have E? Sorry, Chairman. Where are you going?
Brittany.
E's been struck, so it's F now.
But,
see what I'm talking about? Is that's F, right?
yeah, I see where you're going.
Correct. And if you do change that, that paragraph may have to be reworded a little bit, because if it is in front of the planning commission or the board of commissioners, there would have to be a hearing. So it says without a public hearing. I don't think you could say that, because
So you have to take out.
that paragraph would have to be reworded.
Okay, and you guys could fix that by Tuesday.
Monday morning, yes.
Monday morning, yeah, by Monday morning? Okay. So by changing on page 15, changing F from planning director to board of commissioners would also include changing public notice and so forth, and they'll bring those changes. But there's also some other changes under G for a renewal, not to exceed an additional 5 years.
Chairman, if you look in F, it says notice of hearing shall be given in accordance with section 320. Basically, you're following consistently the same process as you did at the beginning. So, would you have to change all that verbiage? Because if it was consistent, you'd come again, notice of hearing, you'd go in front of the Board of Commissioners. So basically, you have it in there, notice of hearing shall be given in accordance with section 320. So I don't know if we'd have to go through all that other paragraphing in that, and then accept the notices would be, if I'm correct, to be consistent, a half mile instead of 500 feet now.
Correct.
Which we did not say yet.
Oh, that's
And I don't think there'll be a whole lot of reworking. I think it'll be pretty basic. It's just
That's what I'm saying.
making
Board,
sure
that
that
it's
that doesn't
just
say.
basically gonna say, you're gonna be consistent of how you started the process with this, and that's kind of what when you had your verbiage at the
My
beginning,
paragraph?
Commissioner DeSanto, this is where it kind of says it already.
Okay.
Thank you.
And do we need to
Change the 500 feet.
change the 500 to a half mile?
Be consistent.
Yeah. So everybody's,
So I would move for approval with changes.
Mr. Chair, I've got a question about subsection G.
at the very bottom,
Yeah, what does that mean for sure?
Shall not exceed.
we do have a motion that was made, no second at this point.
On the changes on F, or the,
He made a motion to approve the half mile, remove the planning director and planning commission with some additional changing in the verbiage that'll happen.
second. To make it consistent.
Okay, so now we're up to discussion. Now, Mr. Farabee, down to
Are we doing G in this motion?
We're doing
J.
the whole page.
J's down at the bottom. I'm thinking we're gonna have to go J.
Yeah, let's separate J.
Yeah, we're gonna do the top part of the page.
No,
and-
no,
G.
no, sub G.
Saying here, he wants a question on
Oh,
G.
Are
okay.
we doing that one?
Yes.
It's a good question.
What does that mean?
What does that mean, Brittany?
We changed that to read because if you read in the first sentence under I sub 1, mining permits shall be valid for 5 years unless a lesser time is specified by the Board of Commissioners. Prior to that, it just said a mining permit shall be valid for additional 5 years. We kind of felt like it was contradictory in case the Board of Commissioners approved a lesser time for a permit. That was the reasoning behind it.
Do we need it?
Well, I guess my confusion is that technically you can read that to say 10 years and that's it. You get a 5-year permit and one renewal and that's it. That can be read that way.
It does kind of sound that way.
And I'd like to take that out of there.
Could we possibly change the word A to each?
Yes.
That might help clarify, but right now it's,
Okay. So would that be in addition to is that okay with the motion maker?
Yes.
Seconder?
Yep.
Okay, they're gonna do that.
Thank you, PJ.
They're gonna do that for you, George.
okay, thank you.
Okay. That was gonna be changed to what?
Each.
Each, okay. And at this point, we're gonna approve those changes on E, F, G, and then transfer of permits.
2 and 3.
But J, complaints, from there to page 16, we are gonna take separately.
Correct. So you want me to make my motion to reflect that?
I
Substitute motion?
Or just amend.
I'll amend my motion to approve page 15 with the exception of J,
Second.
subsection J.
Second.
It's okay with the seconder. That was to add that half mile, take out the planning, add each, all those,
Did all that, Ms. Kara?
Yeah.
Okay.
okay, good.
I've got a problem with 2, Mr. Chair.
Number 2, on transfer of permits,
Transfer of permit.
Mr. Farabee.
I'm not too sure that we shouldn't designate the Board of Commissioners as the approving authority for transfer of permits. And the reason being is that what we just went through 2 years ago, if John Talley would have had a permit, he could have transferred that without any say-so from the government, so to speak, other than just notifying the planning department. And I think because of that, a transfer of permit should be approved by the Board of Commissioners.
I would ask Michelle for some clarification.
Also, because I included transfers in
On your, did,
We usually do that, sorry, Chairman.
Ms. Hadcock?
Ms. Michelle? What is the usual procedure for transfer of permits, even conditional use permits or anything else that we do?
I would have to defer to Mr. Conover. I think he has a little bit more.
Conditional use permits go with the land, not with the landowner. So regardless of who owns the land, on conditional use permits, it just keeps rolling over. Unless there's a specific ordinance, like our vacation home ordinance, where it specifically will say that there is a transfer procedure that requires a hearing. But for the most part, CUPs roll with the property.
So, sorry, Chairman.
Ms. Hadcock?
So, PJ, tell me why this would be any different going through the planning department instead of the Board of Commissioners. Why would a transfer come to us? That would be a problem. What would be the issue where you'd think it might need to come to us? Because that company has a bad reputation or something that we decide, or can it still do that if we have issues with that transfer?
The way I read it, and I could be wrong with it, is it also, for B, the operation is, they're just notifying the planning department. And then B, is the operation is in compliance with the requirements of 320.
Right.
And I believe this section has notices of hearing in it.
It does, 320. So it's
But maybe we want to clarify it,
But-
like Commissioner Farabee is saying, to make it a little
I-
clear that if you do want to hear it, we do have conditional use permits that specifically say, if the transfer occurs, here's the procedure.
Right.
We do have that
Does-
precedent.
This is what I have to ask. Commissioner Farabee, in his sense, it sounds like when you transfer something, it should trigger a public hearing if it's a different company in 320? Or does it not? What I'm saying is, what would trigger the public hearing on a transfer? Just because it says it in 320, but this says if they're following 320, this land, this property, and they transfer it, I give it to George now, and he's a different company, and I transfer it and sign his name, and he buys my company. That property was already complying with 320. Does he have to go through another public hearing? Does his company have to go through public hearing, or is it just, and why
would
should
say
he and
if-
why should he not?
I would say if there's confusion, let staff rewrite it if it want it a little bit more specific. If you want the transfers to go in front of a public hearing, let's specifically say that. Let's not,
I
that's the
believe
intent, let's just say it.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. DeSanto?
in this, I believe that would be safer for us. Because another company could come in, they could have completely different, you might have company A that's very respectful and does what they are supposed to do, and company A turns around and sells to company B that's known for not following the rules.
Oh, can
So
I
we should
ask-
have the opportunity to review that.
I forget to say that. Chairman?
Ms. Hadcock?
Sorry, I'm thinking out loud. I apologize. So, Danielle, I got to ask you a question, please. So you don't go to sleep in the back with your big book. So if your mining company transferred a permit, they're talking about upon a transfer, interest in a mining, the prior owner or operator shall release the responsibilities under the mining permit only if. What I'm saying is when you guys transfer to somebody else, you went from Peatling to Kroll Mining or Tallies or whoever, what would be the issue? Or do you have what I'm saying is it's a different company. It seems logical if it's a different company and it's a new person that you would have another hearing, meaning you'd have a hearing to, so that company was responsible and did everything that Peatling did. When Kroll took it over, they decided, okay, Kroll's a different company. And that's, I guess, what I'm guessing what the issue is, and not that Kroll's a bad company, sorry, Kroll, but just yours just being the example. I don't care what company, if it's Deb and George's, but
Danielle, do you
where I'm
understand all that?
going, what would be the purpose?
I think I understand the question. If you're asking what the process and the purposes of transferring a permit, if we do that, and that's happened, probably actually your guys' example, the best one would be a county permit transferring over, a county pit transferring over to a different company. That's probably the safer analogy here to use. So let's say we were going to transfer it, we would go to the state and we would file all the transfers with the state, and we would assume the liability on the reclamation for any existing disturbance on that portion of it. That state license would transfer over to new company B. At that point, we would come to the county and ask for the same transfer. It sounds from what PJ just said, that on conditional use permits, that would normally just happen. Unless you guys write it specifically into this ordinance that if there's going to be a transfer, it needs to go through a public hearing process, because you have the authority to do that under a conditional use permit when you're defining it the way that you are. I guess I don't feel strongly one way or the other than the fact that the state clearly just lets you transfer it. You don't have to prove your goodness or badness, I guess. I'm not sure how to explain that.
I didn't know
And
how to
I'm
say
not
that
really
quite
sure how
right.
you judge that either, so I'd be a little concerned about how that happens. But
Right.
for the most part, yeah, it is just a transfer of paperwork and assumption of liability. And with that, the state already confirms that you're covering it with your reclamation surety. So
Okay,
Chairman,
that's the best I can do for you.
So we're doing a whole different process with this whole mining permit, so now I totally understand.
Mr. Farabee.
My intent is public awareness.
Right, that it's a new
If
company.
it's on our agenda, then the public can be aware, not that they're all aware, but they can be aware that there is a transfer going on, and if they have some objection or whatever, then they can come to us. We're the elected officials, and they have a right to know, and this is a way to know that mining operation is being transferred to another owner. It's got nothing to do with who that owner is
I know.
at this point.
I
It's
was just using for
just
example.
public awareness.
Yeah.
So I agree.
Ms. Hadcock.
Okay, Chairman, I agree then, because again, how we did the process is through consent calendar, regular agenda. If that company has no problems, it's going through consent. The transfer is good. If there's issues, or if there isn't any problems, as to good or bad, it doesn't matter. If the 320 and that company is transferring and everything is good, do we do a different process? This is another question. Do we do an inspection? Did we put that in there?
Well, we can, Michelle Hoffman, State's Attorney's Office, I wanted to point out that we actually have a detailed process for transfer of VHR licenses or conditional
go.
use permits, and that involves notification of neighbors. It also includes, in that instance, a hearing before the Planning Commission. I suspect, given the prior amendments, any such hearing would be before this body, the Board of Commissioners. So as PJ said, Mr. Conover said, we could rewrite this section similar to the VHRs.
Ms. Hadcock for follow-up.
So that's, and I forgot all about that, because even if you're doing beauty shops or whatever, even if we don't, you transfer into George, you still have to go through an inspection or some detailed stuff too. It doesn't matter who you are, just to make sure your company's in compliance, whether it's through the state and then complying through the county's rules and regs.
And we certainly could add that into the process.
Following 320, yes, sir.
So,
Or yes, ma'am.
Kara, the motion on the floor is to approve, you got that, the half mile, changing the planning directors to
Page 15 with the exception of section J.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's, okay, and then this talk on this one, did we already take a vote on that?
No.
Okay, so if they want to reword the transfer part, do you remember who the motion maker was?
DeSanto and
Santo and
was the-
Hadcock second?
Yes.
So they'd have to get their approval to amend, to add that on there.
Just to rewrite on transfers, section 2 on page 15.
Are you okay with that, George?
Fine, and I've got a question, number 3, permit limit enlargement.
So Kara, the motion maker and seconder is okay with that rewording, with all that other stuff and
Rewriting section
rewriting
2.
that. And now George has a question on 3. George.
Practically speaking, it would look like, well, to the diminishing returns or diminishing assets issue of mining, the mining footprint's going to move in the real world. I'm guessing that for every acre or for a foot that you unclaim, you should reclaim a foot.
Yeah.
So, just back up a little bit. If I'm in the mining business, I come in for this permit limit or whatever, I'm going to apply for the entire property. So for expansion or for movement of the footprint. So I don't think we need paragraph 3 at all. In the real world, I don't think we need paragraph 3.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. DeSanto.
So to clarify, George, yes, what you're saying is that if I want to mine 30 acres and I come in and I get a permit to mine 30 acres and I mine 10 of it in this corner, and I'm done mining that 10, that I shouldn't have to come in and get another permit to move to the next 10 and reclaim the 10 that I originally mined, and then move to the next 10.
And enlargement, if I might, Mr. Chair, enlargement
I'm
is
not enlarging
not
anything, I'm
enlarging the
still within
footprint.
my 30 acres.
I'll ask for some clarification from State Attorney's
Michelle,
Office.
thank you. Michelle Hoffman, State's Attorney's Office. I think we're comparing apples and oranges. The permit enlargement is dealing with a new application. It's not dealing with diminishing assets. It's not dealing with legal nonconforming. You come in, you're seeking a permit, and you're defining your permit area as, say, 30 acres. Well, it doesn't matter that you're starting maybe in the southwest corner. You don't need to come in and get a new permit. You get a move anywhere within that 30 acres because that is the permit limit as defined under the new ordinance. So it's completely separate from legal nonconforming. So the only time you'd need a new application is if you want to expand to 40 acres versus the 30 as defined in your original application.
Thank you, Michelle.
Mr. Chair, if I might do.
Farabee.
And now you're talking about acquiring some more property and then if I'm in the mining business, when I come in for a permit, I'm gonna get every acre I own in that permit. So you're changing the game. If I want to expand beyond that, I have to go buy some more ground, lease or whatever, some more ground. That's a whole different matter.
Yes.
This to me is enlarging what I currently own. I don't think we need it.
Doesn't make sense, George, but
Well, it doesn't really specify that.
no.
Why,
I,
Mr. Chair,
Mr. DeSanto.
Michelle, can you explain why that's even in there?
We need this because that way we don't have a question as to what area is intended to be mined. I come in and apply for an application. I'm saying, this is the 30 acres I'm going to mine.
So if
So
you buy an additional 30 or an additional 10 acres next to it,
you would need a new application for those additional 10 acres.
that's
But this way, there's no question that, the neighbors are on notice that these are the neighbors or concerned citizens are on notice that this application deals with whatever is defined as the permit limit in that application.
All right. Thank you, Michelle. I think we're going to move on. I think the answer has been questioned. So far, the motion on the floor is to approve 15 with the changes that have been made, with 2 and some rewording. Any further discussion? Ron, do you have anything before we vote?
I do not.
All right.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. DeSanto,
I would make a motion to approve.
are you making a substitute motion?
Well, actually, I already made the motion.
Yeah, you already
We
did.
Did all these changes.
Yep,
Okay,
you
never
already
mind.
did.
We're good.
You made the first motion. Okay. So all in favor indicate by saying aye in a roll call vote.
Buskerud,
Aye.
DeSanto,
Aye.
Farabee,
Yes.
Adcock,
Aye.
LaCroy.
Aye. And that will bring us down to the bottom of 15, that last paragraph, J in complaints, and we'll go over to page 16. And we have got a lot of work that was done on those. So I'd look for a little background from staff if I could. Thanks, Brittany, for volunteering.
Yes. So basically, when we wrote this, this is how we typically handle all complaints in our office. We receive the complaint, we investigate it, we contact the applicant or the owner operator. We try to work out some kind of corrective action for the complaint first. We work out a time frame, things like that. And then if that can't be remedied, typically we send it to the state's attorney's office, but in this case, they would be in front of you guys under the section K.
Okay.
So that's where we came up with the language on the complaints, because that's how we handle them in our office currently, with the exception of number 3.
Under J, under complaints, received some concerns that they'd like consideration of some changes. One would be a 30-day notice. Complaints must be filed within 30 days of alleged activity giving rise to the complaint. Also, planning department will set reasonable time for mining company to comply with complete corrective action. And a request that JC on page 16 be modified to if mining operation fails to perform required corrective actions in the time allowed, planning director shall initiate a revocation of the permit as described in section K. I'm sure commissioners got I like it. I'm thinking that would be an addition to under complaints. Any discussion on that? Do I need to read them again? We're just talking about the complaints, J through A, B, and C, possibly adding complaints must be filed within 30 days of alleged activity giving rise to the complaint. The planning department will set a reasonable time for mining company to comply with and complete the corrective action. And another section, if the mining operation fails to perform as required corrective action in time allowed, the planning director shall initiate a revocation of the permit as described in section K. And they should probably be numbered instead of lettered. Just under, you got A, B, and C, under revocation, or under complaints. That's as far as I'm going right now.
Do 30 days.
They're asking that to be added.
Oh, what would substantiate?
Well, good. Ms. Hadcock.
Sorry, we met yesterday, we didn't put 30 days because we didn't know how you'd substantiate 30 days from what? Brittany maybe, or Michelle, do you remember?
Michelle Hoffman, State's Attorney's Office. I believe we concluded that 30 days was rather restrictive. And we really didn't want to put a time limit on people being able to come forward with their complaints.
Right, because if you're in there, sorry, Chairman, okay.
Go ahead.
Don't go to sleep yet. So what I'm saying is that you open mine, it's in there 5 years. If you only had 30 days, so because it says complaints must be filed within 30 days of alleged activity giving rise to the complaint. 30 days alleged activity giving rise to the complaint. based on, I guess anything that, I'll just say it up straight. Anytime I had a complaint on anything, I just took care of it. It didn't matter if it was 30 days. I guess I didn't get why it was 30 days. When you have a complaint, and I believe when we're in committee, even the mining company said if they have a complaint, they just try to nip it in the butt
Yeah.
and move forward. So I don't think it needs to have a time limit. I think they'll take care of what they need to take care of. Otherwise, like any other business, someone will file.
And the reason there was no reference to the reasonable time for the corrective action is my understanding that's something that's included within the corrective action plan that's drafted by the planning department. So that's done as a matter of course. So, I mean, we could add that language, but it is something that is done.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Farabee.
I'd like to ask Mr. Tiedemann, this is his submission, I'd like to ask him for his rationale for the 30 days.
Right.
Brian Tiedemann with Pete Lean and Sons. There's got to be some statutes of limitations on a complaint. If there's a complaint on an issue, why wouldn't you bring it up within 30 days? If you don't set a timeline on it, you open the door to a complaint to come up from literally anywhere, from any time, from anyone, regarding anything. So that's the reasoning for putting a time limit on it.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. DeSanto.
So in other words, Brian, what you're saying is you could have had a dump truck pull out onto Sturgis Road a year and a half ago.
Yep.
And it made a car have to go into the other lane and go around, and they never said anything about it. And then they come up a year and a half later and say, hey, your dump truck pulled out and ran me off the road. I get that now. That makes sense, that there would need to be some time limit between when the incident that caused the complaint happened and the time that they make their complaint. I mean, that makes sense.
Chairman?
You done?
I'm done.
Ms.
Okay,
Hadcock?
so the the planning director would investigate it, and it was a year and a half ago, he would say, we can't do
We want to
anything
put that,
now.
on-
You
Mr.
know what I'm
Chair, do we
saying?
want to
So-
put that on the planning commissioner to make that decision?
Well, they do. If they come back and they're gonna say, okay, we have a complaint, it was a year and a half ago, and now we want a hearing because their dump truck ran me off the road. PJ, you're gonna say, okay, let's have a hearing.
No. As the planning director, I'm in favor of putting some type of time limit on it, but A, B, and C, as it exists now, is the filter. Complaint comes in, we filter it through that, then we decide if it needs to come before the board or not. So if it was an incident like that, just given what was presented here, probably wouldn't recommend a hearing.
So give me an example why you need 30 days, why we need the time limit.
I would agree with what Mr. Tiedemann said.
What did he say?
Anybody, anytime for anything.
Which happens all the time.
We could get complaints daily and then have to go investigate each one.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, as much as
Mr. Farabee.
much as I hate to, I probably should ask Ms. Parker or Mr. Hickey what their thoughts are.
Pick one.
Oh, I
Kelsey's
think their
been
20
wanting to
minutes is
speak all
up.
night, haven't you? So you're gonna make Mr. Hickey do it?
15 minutes reserved, so.
Just kidding.
Thank you for waking me up. I appreciate that. No, I don't have a problem with that, the example that you give with the car accident or the near accident. Let's say you have another example that there's water pollution. And so on the 31st day, you can't complain about that? I mean, there has to be either an event like you're talking about, but there's also situations where it's not discovered until after 30 days.
Well, I'm just thinking with that example, you can't define which the start and end date is.
That's true. You wouldn't.
So-
So it would come from the time that those people discovered that there was a water problem. And then so in other words, they couldn't come in and say a year and a half from now, we had a water problem a year and a half ago.
and we didn't know what the cause of it was.
But that won't matter, because if they didn't know that they had a water problem, and what I'm saying is there should be some time
Yeah,
in between when they discover their water problem and how long it is before they turn around and come after the mining company and say there's a problem.
Okay, but I think there has to be a discovery
So,
element to some of
Mr.
this.
Chair,
I'm sorry. There has to be a discovery element to
Let's let
some
him,
of that.
these two finish up their discussion.
well, I called him up.
I know, Mark's talking to him.
Oh.
You done, Mark?
I'm done.
Okay, now, Mr.
So,
Fair.
Mr. Hickey, if we added the word, the discovered or alleged activity, that would satisfy you? Or,
Well, I guess I'd like to look
When
at the
discovered.
language that you actually put together, and then whether it would satisfy me or not, it might. I just would like to look at, if you're going to rework it, I would, like an opportunity, because in the copy that I had, it didn't have the 30-day discussion, so that it must have come up relatively recently, so I haven't had a chance to really look at it.
but 30 days after discovered, or some language to that effect.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Is that what you're looking at? So,
Still believe the timeline's not right, but that's fine. I think it'll happen anyway. So is there a motion?
no,
Chair?
there's no motion. This was just for discussion, so. We're talking under, like I said, complaints. In red, the planning department may inspect a mining operation on a complaint basis or as directed by the planning commission or board of commissioners. Any complaint received.
Chairman, I have a motion on item J. So, item J on complaints, we can make I say we do approval of item J, and with the understanding that we are going to look at the timeline on that, and
The
maybe-
wording on the
yes,
rest.
and see if this board at next reading, if they want that timeline, why they should or why they shouldn't, once we investigate a little bit more.
I agree. So we have a motion to approve J complaints, page 16, and bring back some changes for
So
Tuesday.
moved with changes.
Seconded by DeSanto. Further discussion? All in favor indicate by saying aye, and roll call vote.
Buskerud,
Aye.
DeSanto,
Aye.
Farabee,
Yes.
LaCroy,
Or sorry,
Aye.
Hadcock?
Oh,
Hadcock,
Aye.
LaCroy.
aye. Next, we come up to K, revocation of mining permits. This is the rest of page 16. And let's go ahead and add page 17. So under K, under revocation of mining permits. In red, some stuff that was changed. The planning director shall schedule a hearing before the Board of Commission upon the occurrence of any of the following. Ownership or operator has failed to comply with the conditions of a current mining permit. The owner and operator has failed to comply with the operation plans and as detailed in the mining permit application. The mining operation is not in compliance with section 320 RD. The performance standards are a material change in circumstances renders the continued operation of the mine a threat to public health, safety, and general welfare. Also underneath that, I believe it was added the Board of Commissioners instead of Planning Commission. There was a request that it be modified so that a hearing is scheduled if one of the items A through D have occurred and the owner or operator fails to perform a required corrective action as determined and submitted in JC.
Chairman,
Ms. Hadcock.
at this point, you change all the item K to do that, because it says at this point we're being consistent with having a hearing. Number one, to justify one way or another if there should be a revocation, or if there's not. So it would go, just like to be consistent with any other thing that we're doing on here, it'd go to the Board of Commissioners.
Agreed.
So is that a motion to approve 16,
Yes, sir.
17?
Just, yes, just for discussion if we could.
Yeah,
Second?
we'll do 16 and 17. So it's been moved and approved to approve items 16K down through K, all the way through 17 with the reds, with the rework. Any further, moved by Hadcock, seconded by DeSanto. Further discussion? Mr. Farabee.
Does Mr. Tiedemann want to tell us what he's really saying there?
Who?
This is Mr. Tiedemann's input, I believe, yeah. And
Are you Brian Tiedemann?
am I pronouncing that wrong?
No.
No, you're good. Brian Tiedemann with Peatling and Sons,
George.
and you're asking just about the revocation part?
Right, what did you have in mind there?
The big word there is, for us, was "and." So we suggest that revocation be modified so that a hearing is scheduled if one of the items A through D have occurred and the owner and operator fails to perform required corrective action as determined and submitted in JC. So we're just looking for if the owner and operator has done one of these things that is listed in the revocation section and they failed to perform the corrective action, then you schedule a public hearing. Don't schedule a public hearing until they've proven that they can, or not proven that they can do the work.
Yeah, that's what.
Thank you.
For the Board of Parliament.
I'm trying to figure out where that's, how that fits in here.
Where's Tiedemann's again? You got too many papers. I'll read your papers, Lloyd. I'm not comprehending.
May I clarify just one thing?
Yes.
Okay.
Clarify the whole thing one more time, but I can't comprehend.
Okay. I understand
Bit
you're
slower.
looking for where this would go.
Yeah.
In the heading right after revocation of mining permit, that lead-in is where you want that put, right?
So after point C, the mining operation is not in compliance with section 320. I'm sorry.
You want it up top side there, I think.
Okay. Jessica, you might want to come back up here. I'm going to turn this over to Jessica and let her clarify.
Thank you, Brian.
Jessica Larson, attorney for Peatling and Sons. And as clarification, we would request that the language go in section K, revocation of mining permit, after the first sentence. The planning director shall schedule a hearing before the Board of Commissioners upon the occurrence of any of the following and, any one of the items A through D have occurred and the owner-operator fails to perform required corrective action as determined and submitted in JC.
And those
above.
numbers would change.
Yeah, to reflect whatever numbering would be correct, but the intent behind that is just so that we don't have the hearing prior to having allowed the mining company to make corrective action.
I would amend my motion then to add that in.
Seconders,
I will second that amendment.
seconders okay with that? So we'll add that,
Amendment in.
okay. So the current motion on the floor is to add that section to K. And is,
Your little thing.
yeah, go ahead.
Put it in the book.
And approval. Is there any questions on 17? There were some changes under N, limits of operation, mining operations. Instead of pursued, it's called active. And there was an and license and geological engineering studies. And then we got some highlighted stuff. Do we want to do that separate?
Yes.
So let's stick with page 16 and then come over and do this, Brittany.
Yes, I just have a couple wordsmith things here.
Okay.
On the top of the page, instead of ABC, it should probably be 1, 2, 3, and then we'll make those references appropriate to the correct numbering instead of the letters.
Okay, thanks, Brittany. So the motion on the floor is presently with 16 with the changes and direction to add some language under K that was requested. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Roll call vote.
Chairman,
Nope, hold on.
I know, are we changing, because I think the original motion was 16 and 17.
Yeah, we're changing just to 16.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Did someone make that motion? Just to have 16
You were the motion maker.
Motion maker, amend it
on 16?
to just include 16.
16, item K, right?
I'm not keeping track well.
Yeah,
Okay,
just page 16,
Okay, so-
item
K.
through the K.
Okay.
It was, and you guys approved the motion. The motion maker was okay with the seconder was, but we're going to stick with 16. Okay.
Thank you, Lloyd.
So clarification taken. So item 16, roll call vote, please.
Buskerud?
Aye.
DeSanto?
Aye.
Farabee?
Yes.
Hadcock?
Aye.
LaCroy?
Aye. Next, we'll come to page 17, and we'll probably need some clarification from staff.
There's only a couple things that changed. Again, there's some wordsmithing on this. The A and B will be 1 and 2. The I and II will be ABC, so we'll have to change the numbering on that. Another big one that is of importance is down in the last paragraph above enforcement. It says must be registered with Pennington County Planning Department, or excuse me, where does it say that? Oh, sorry. With the general requirements of mining operations set forth in subsection H, it's now subsection G because of the changes.
Oh, okay.
So we have to make sure that we change that because H has different, it's a completely different section and it pertains to different
Okay.
things. And then in this section, the paragraph that was previous, we just broke out the paragraph because it was a large paragraph that was hard to read. So we just split out what it said.
So that's all the changes that were spread out a little bit.
Correct.
Numbered, and you need to do subsection G, change that. Is there any discussion from the board? Mr. Farabee?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. 180 days after we get this thing passed, how are those existing operators going to know that they got 180 days to get in and get registered?
PJ, would that be a question for you or?
It's for Jerry.
And what happens if they don't come in and get registered? Is it upon discovery?
Good word. How are we going to discover?
I don't know. I don't know. That was the question for Mr. Hickey, and he was sleeping. I wanted to see if he was awake.
For PJ County Planning Department, we can send out first-class mailings to them, kind of like a hearing letter, but without the certified mail. And we can put it in the paper. We've already had a year and a half or so worth of hearings and meetings. I would think that those that need to know probably know that, and we're probably following what's going on, but it can't be for sure. But we can send out letters if the board would like us to.
Yes. Chairman.
Mr., you done, George?
Well, I guess kind of. To me, it's they got legal nonconforming. I think the law says pre-existing operation or condition or whatever use, and we're going to make these folks just about comply with when we say Section H or the new Section G, setbacks and groundwater monitoring and whatever else, so they don't have much of a pre-existing use by the time they dance through all these hoops. I guess that's where I'm going. Thank you.
Thanks, George. Ms. Hadcock?
What's that, about 100 active mines right now that we would send those out, so I'm in favor of that. Okay,
You done?
yes, ma'am,
I-
or sir.
I would,
Santo?
I would tend to lean in that direction. Yes, I think they should be notified, but I'm questioning whether or not, I mean, grandfathered means grandfathered, and if we're gonna create additional requirements on them, I don't think that's right.
Only if they,
Let's ask Michelle.
Michelle Hoffman, State's Attorney's Office. I think there's some confusion. We specifically moved the requirements involving setbacks, groundwater monitoring, renewal, et cetera. So the only provisions that the mining operations who are actually grandfathered or subject to legal nonconforming use would be G, and that's more of the operational issues, hours of operation, dust control, noise control, lighting. So when you're talking about grandfathering, you're talking about solely about the ability to use the property, to use the minerals. You're not talking about how they operate. So G just allows us to say, yeah, you get to continue to mine, but, perhaps we limit the hours you're mining because maybe the neighbors don't want you mining at 2 a.m. But it's a separate issue from grandfathering the actual use. And it's only subsection G that they would be subject to.
Okay.
most of this they have to do anyway.
So I'm leaning towards leaving things as is. Rest of the board for page 17.
Well,
With-
No.
No,
Mr. Hickey, you have a question?
No.
Mr. Hickey, is that okay, Chairman?
you're asking Mr. Hickey?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Thank you.
With a happy yes.
Mike Hickey. There's just one thing that I guess I'm just really concerned about, and I'm just going to throw it out there, and you guys you understand that you're saying that mining operations that are a legal non-conforming use do not require a permit under this section. And so those existing applications can go on forever without any type of review unless there's a complaint. Is that what you want? I mean, we suggested language that at least there be a renewal permit or something so that there would be an automatic review. And we suggested that there be an inspection, whether it's on a yearly basis or a 2-year basis or something like that. Those things have been removed. And I guess I'm just concerned that the word grandfathering, I understand that, but basically you're just saying we're never going to look at you again unless there's a complaint. And if that's what you want, okay, but I just want you to be aware of that's the effect of this language.
Thank you, Mr. Hickey.
Thank you.
Any further comment? Ms. Michelle? I'd like to hear from the State's Attorney's Office.
Well, with regard to Mr. Hickey's statement, when we're talking about grandfathering, we're only talking about the actual parcel where there is current excavation. I mean, this is limited to that particular parcel, not contiguous parcels, not parcels that are currently owned subject to a mining license that may be mined in 30 years. All of those particular operations are going to need to seek a mining application. We're just talking about existing excavation activity on those parcels. Furthermore, the language that's been proposed concerning review or renewal, there's case law under diminishing assets that has specifically found those types of sunset clauses illegal and a taking of property. And, I'll defer to the mining industry, but I firmly believe that if you're going to say, well, you're grandfathered in for a couple of years, but in 2 years when your construction permit's up or whatever the particular permit might be, you have to come in now and seek a mining license under 320, there's going to be an argument that you've committed a taking of their property and there's going to be litigation.
Thank you, Michelle. That's the way I kind of took this, is it's into what's present. It's not for the, I think we need to stay in common sense to kind of stay with as written. That's my opinion, but there's no motion on the floor for page 17 yet. Ron, do you have any insight?
No, I guess I don't have any insight. I tend to agree with you. Um, You know, I'd like to shut them down, but we can't do that. So I guess we got to take them for what they are and let them go.
Thanks, Ron. PJ?
Sure. PJ Conway, Director of Planning Department. Just want to let the board know that something like this was done 5-6 years ago with VHRs before the ordinance was enacted, that all legal nonconforming entities were allowed to come before the planning department and not have to go through the whole process. So there is precedent for this process in the county.
I'm looking for the board for a motion.
Motion to approve item page 17 as is. How about 18 as well? Yes. 17 and 18 with the word which. Yes, ma'am.
So there's a motion on the floor to approve 17 and 18. Is there a second? A second for discussion. Any further discussion?
Make a substitute motion, page 17 only.
Second.
Okay, substitute motion to approve 17 only as written. Seconded by DeSanto. Further discussion?
Further with corrective changes of the.
Yes.
Yeah, with 17 with the changes that are in there. Am I correct?
With subsection H changed to G, and yes.
Yeah. Is that, that's what you meant? Just page 17 with the changes, George? Okay, yeah.
Correct.
Clarification. So, any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye. Roll call vote.
Buskerud?
No.
DeSanto?
Aye.
Farabee?
Yes.
Hadcock?
Aye. LaCroy.
Aye. So next, that'll bring us to page 18. You want to do 18, 19, and save 20 to the last one?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to do just stop work.
Just 18?
Just stop work order, just one.
Just one.
Just Q or O1, guess it is. Yeah.
You would like to do just the stop work order
Right.
with all the subs, A, B, C, D?
The entire paragraph of O1.
Is that what the wish of the board is?
It's fine by me.
Okay. We're going to concentrate on stop work order section. Mr. Farabee.
I'd like to see that planning director changed to the Board of Commissioners.
Can't.
Mr. PJ.
Yeah, if that was to be done, it could be 2 weeks from the time our department finds out about a problem.
Yep. And then the chairman,
Ms. Hadcock.
and then if someone complained, it'd have to come to us first, and that could be 2 weeks later before any action was taken. That would not get that complaint taken care of very fast.
Mr. Farabee. Are you done, Deb?
Yes.
Mr. Farabee.
A number of years ago, the planning director issued a stop work order to an individual or an operation, and it cost that operation pretty much their entire tourist season. And I think that was very unfair, and I think that when you're going to shut somebody down like that, it ought to be the elected officials of the county and not an appointed bureaucrat.
Point taken, George.
Or hired bureaucrat.
Any discussion, Mr. DeSanto?
I wouldn't have a problem with it saying that the planning director make recommendation to the Board of Commissioners for a stop work order. I understand that it's going to set things back, PJ. I get that.
Mr. Chair, if I might, if it's,
I'm going to get with Ron just a second. Unless you got something to add to that besides
I do,
bringing up something past.
if it's so serious, then we can have a special meeting. If it's
Okay.
that serious to the public health and safety.
All right, thank you. Ms.
That's the craziest thing I've ever heard. If you had a stop work order every time somebody did something and you had to go to the Board of Commissioners, guys, for a meeting or a special meeting, you know how many special meetings and Board of Commissioner meetings we would have? Guys, that's why you have a planning director. It doesn't make sense.
Thanks, Deb. Ron, you want to chime in?
I second Deb's comments.
Okay. Michelle, did you have any?
Yes, Michelle Hoffman, State's Attorney's Office. And I'm not sure of the stop work order that Commissioner Farabee is referencing. I do know there was an injunctive order issued by Judge Fifley with regard to a particular business, but that had to do with a septic system that was surfacing and threatening the safety and integrity of our water system. Also, with that in mind, if there's delay and there's harm suffered by the public, that's on our hands. I mean, there are situations, nuisances that need to be remedied, not remedied, but at least stopped, in terms of a stop work order, why they're remedied. And I would be concerned about any potential liability the county might incur because we failed to act when we knew there was a threat to public health, welfare, and safety.
Thank you, Michelle. So with that discussion, and we were agreed the stop work order section was what we were going to take up. Is there a motion to approve or deny?
Approve. Motion to approve.
Motion made by Hadcock to approve,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Buskard. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chair,
Mr. DeSanto.
with the additional information that Michelle just mentioned, and the fact that in order to issue the stop work order, the following circumstances have to be occurring, I think that I'm okay with the planning director issuing that. It would obviously be brought to us immediately after it was issued, correct? We'd be aware of it.
And then it'd go through the process. Commissioner DeSanto.
Yeah, usually if there's going to be a stop work order, it's probably going to trigger other sections of this ordinance. Stop work orders that we issue now, not even the planning commission finds out about them unless there's things that come up. But we usually handle it internally, but I think if stop work order under this specific ordinance would trigger other sections of this ordinance where you'd find out about it. That's a long way of saying yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, to put it in perspective, how many stop work orders have
Mr.
you,
Farabee.
how many stop work orders have you issued in the last 2 years?
I'd say a couple dozen.
But that would be for,
Not for,
Not
none for mining.
no.
Just
There's-
other ordinance violations in the county.
Yes, I understand. Thank you, Mr. Farabee.
A substitute motion that, in case of the mining operation, stop work order, the Board of Commissioners. Substitute Board of Commissioners for Planning Director.
Mr. Farabee's made a substitute motion to make the commissioners the stop work order stop point. Is there a second? Seeing none, motion fails. We're back to the original motion to approve. All in favor, indicate by saying aye. Oh, do you have it?
Roll call.
Yeah, we got to do, I was just about ready to say roll call. I'll indicate by aye by roll call.
Buskard,
Aye.
DeSanto,
Aye.
Farabee,
No.
Hadcock,
Aye.
LaCroy.
Aye. Okay, the commission wanted to just take up that section. So now we got 2 injunctions,
Move approval.
3, 4, 5, and 6.
Bottom of page 18, move approval, injunction.
That would go, bottom of 18 would go with 19.
No, let's do 18 since we're wanting to piece this together. Let's go to 18.
I think the bottom of
Junction.
18 and 19.
Actually, it goes injunction, nuisance, performance, inspection. Do we need to go individually, board?
Well, I think that's what I was just telling you, Deb, is the bottom, we have injunction 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then we got section construction permits on 19, but take 20 up separate.
So go 18 to 19, all the way to section 507 construction permits. Is that what we're doing?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay.
Is the board okay with that? You know what we're going? Okay.
Okay.
Pages 18 and 19?
Well, it's,
Injunction goes to, sorry, Lori, I'm doing.
yeah, injunction goes from 18
To number 6.
to number 6 on 19. That's what we're going to take up.
Yes, sir.
Move for approval.
Second.
Move for approval, seconded. Discussion. And none, all in favor, indicate by aye and roll call.
Buskerud?
Aye.
DeSanto?
Aye.
Farabee?
Yes.
Hadcock?
Aye.
LaCroy?
Aye. Now we'll take up section 507, construction permits on the bottom of 19. B with minerals, it looks like one of the changes was shall be in conformance with and review under the standards set forth in section 320 with the exception of bonding and surety requirements. See section South Dakota Codified Law 45-6B-4. Is there any discussion on that?
I have a discussion.
Ms. Hadcock?
Michelle, I think I had talked to you about this, or, do we have any jurisdiction over hard rock mining in the county or the cities?
Hard rock mining, one of the things as we move forward with the committee concerning hard rock mining is trying to define exactly what areas the county may or may not regulate. And legal as well as planning department have already begun reaching out to experts in the field. I mean, that's going to be a question that we're going to have to answer as we move forward, because the Mining Act of 1872 is somewhat complicated, and it's a good question, and it's a question we're going to answer as we move forward.
I guess, Chairman,
Ms.
I guess
Hadcock?
that's why I asked, because if we're forming a committee and doing some stuff with it, are we legally or illegally doing a committee or something that can't regulate in the first place?
No, I don't think we're doing anything illegally. I think that, first of all, with regards to 507B, certainly if there were provisions that we did not have authority to regulate, that would be something that in an individual, say an individual mining permit
find
would
out.
be addressed.
We'd find out when we looked into it.
And there's probably, there's likely areas that we may be able to regulate locally, but you're correct. We have to make sure that we understand what our authority is.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion? Look for a motion for section 507, bottom of page 19.
Motion to approve.
Moved by Buskerud,
Second.
seconded by DeSanto. Discussions? Hearing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye. Roll call vote.
Buskerud?
Aye.
DeSanto?
Aye.
Farabee?
Yes.
Hadcock?
Aye.
LaCroy?
Aye. Brings us to page 20, section 511, fees. There were some changes, and I believe there's some discussion on this.
Jeremy?
Ms. Hadcock?
Why this was changed is because of the staff time and what actually we added with extra work through the planning and the verifications and everything that we do through the planning department. We also looked, and people told us to look at Lawrence County. We did, for mineral mining, it's $10,000 for an application. For small and large, small is 1,000, large is 7. We came up with 2,500 based on the work and the things that we would have to do through the planning department. And then the renewal was more work because we had changed the renewal process through the county, and we had made it to $8,000, which I think for all the staff time as well, that was being pretty fair, because their renewals. Michelle, did you have, or Brittany, did you have the renewal? I forgot, I apologize, I thought I wrote that down.
I think the biggest thing with renewals is with the notice of hearings and additional work that Jerry would have to do, putting together letters and
But
things.
what was Lawrence County's renewal?
I don't remember.
It was a lot more than ours, I think.
Yeah, I
So,
don't remember
just,
exactly.
no, I don't have it. Okay, sorry.
So here's some, I haven't heard a motion yet.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. DeSanto.
I have a question for Deb. What did you say differentiates small from large?
Well, in theirs, they actually categorized it different than we did. So we based it on, they based it on small and large. We based it on how much work it takes through the planning department for our permit. Because we don't have small and large. If you look, we have A1 General Ag that's in personal use, which is a lot different because they're allowed to do it in A1 General Ag if you're like a rancher or under 40 acres. But then when you start getting a permit through us, we did it again based on work and not small and large.
What if we're talking about some of these smaller gold mining, panning, maybe running a sluice box, something like that? What are we?
PJ, is that, or Brittany, that's a whole, are they still paying the same amount at 2,500?
I mean, that seems.
And do we regulate it that through, I don't know, do they go through this process, Michelle or Brittany? If you just don't, you know what I'm saying?
Sorry, PJ Connor, we don't know of any of those, and when we're having our meetings with representatives that we're going to learn about the mineral mining, we'll ask those questions of how they regulate those too.
Also, we can address the mineral ones later on.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, this is just, okay, now I just,
No sweat.
I'll approve, page 20.
well, my page 20 only has 2,500 for renewal.
Yep.
You're suggesting 25 and upping it 1,000. Was that what it says are off to the side?
Low, yes, sir. And then.
With the recommended changes, okay.
Yes, sir.
And the conditional use permits in red, mineral mining's 5,000. So for clarification, Commission, off to the red is the recommendations to application fee to 2,500 and renewal fee from 500 to 1,000. And there's been a motion for that. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by DeSanto. Any further discussion? Seeing none.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Farabee.
the red conditional use permit, mineral mining, now that's aggregate or that's hard rock?
They'll go through the same they'll go through. Sorry.
Is there somebody that can answer that for him?
That's actually for the hard rock mining, because before, if we hadn't added that in there, a hard rock mining permit would have been the normal conditional use permit fee of $300.
So it's a safeguard for the paperwork.
Correct. There's other, like for wind energy, is it wind energy? That has a different fee structure for the conditional use permit. So that's what we used.
Okay, Ms. Hadcock. Sorry,
So-
hold on, it's Farabee.
I'd like to ask Mr. Dean if he's got any comments on that.
George, if I could have a leeway just for a sec. The conditional use permit.
Ask him.
Oh,
not
sorry.
me.
Before he.
And I got to ask, are you okay with it? Because he had the floor.
Yes.
Okay, sorry, Mr. Farabee. Because we don't have a, I'm going brain dead now. Because we don't have an ordinance on hard rock mining, we have to put it under conditional use permit, not like conditional uses like we normally have, George. So that's why you see conditional use permit, because if a hard rock mining company comes in, if I'm correct at this time, they're gonna have to get a conditional use permit. Am I right? Okay, just so we differentiate that. We got 320 for us, and they're gonna have to get a conditional use permit and run through 320 plus the process
Okay, so
of a conditional use.
Michelle, would you like to add to the conversation?
Yes, Michelle Hoffman, State's Attorney's Office. First of all, we're talking about new applications, so with regard to Mr. Dean, he may likely be grandfathered in under the legal nonconforming. Also, it is the intent of planning staff and legal to look at, because again, as we stated, this is something that we're moving forward and passing, but it doesn't mean this is set in stone, no pun intended. That that we're going to be looking at the idea of differentiating between large and small scale operations. We do think that's a very valid point, so it's something we would be working on.
Okay, Mr. Ferb, you got the floor.
Sorry, thank you, George.
Right now, if this is in effect, Mr. Dean finds a spot out there in the hills with some non-aggregate or hard rock or whatever you want to call it, he's going to have to come in and get a conditional use permit and pay $5,000? Is that what this says? If it does, I totally disagree.
Okay, that's what it
And
says.
I'd like to
here.
have him speak at,
You'd like,
Oh,
you-
yeah.
Mr.
Come on up,
Mr.
Jim.
Farabee requesting
Come
you
on
to
up.
speak.
I'll be very quick.
I appreciate everybody's cooperation tonight.
Yeah, these costs are pretty crazy for me because we have small little operations kind of here and there where we only take small amounts of material depending on what the market is asking for. So this could actually really put us in a bind. I would ask that you would do it on a cost situation. If I was close, especially with your half-mile thing, I mean, I can see where your costs are going to go through the roof on your mailings, on your half-mile deal. But for me, it won't, because I don't hardly have anybody within a half mile of most of my pits. So if you could do it on a cost situation per person, that would help me out quite a bit.
Could you clarify the cost?
Well, what your actual cost is. You've got your mailings, you've got your, whatever your actual cost would happen to be for that, say a smaller operation.
Okay.
Which if you could go ahead and look at a small operation type deal, that would be good, and set it at a smaller fee like Lawrence County did.
Okay, Mrs. Haig, George, you don't mind?
No, it's just, when you're saying the cost, the administrative cost for we the government.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Because evidently your costs are a lot higher on all of your building permits and things that you're doing right now. You must be absorbing quite a bit of cost on a lot of your other permits that you're putting out now.
Okay.
Maybe not.
Ms. Hadcock, got a follow-up?
So your $5,000 would be for 5 years, wouldn't it? If that's kind of where we're gonna go for most of our permits. So 5 years, you have a permit, you're gonna spend basically $1,000 a year.
Well,
To have a
the
permit.
$5,000 is, excuse me, for the permit, and then it would be $1,000 a year.
No, because you don't
Sorry.
renew it every,
Yeah,
a conditional
okay, yeah.
use permit, you wouldn't,
Yeah,
you,
$1,000, yeah, but some of our
that's-
pits, we may not even take $1,000 worth out, so we're gonna have to weed through some of our stuff and just put it to bed.
But, Mr. Dean, I'll say it up straight, $1,000 a year for a operation or a business, I believe a lot of us have to go through it, whether you're in beauty shops or anything else, you're paying a fee every year. So I don't think that's an outrageous cost for $1,000 a year for a company that owns.
Well, I disagree with you, because I have 4 pits in Pennington County.
Right.
And I have 4 pits in Custer County, so if Custer County did the same thing, all of a sudden I'm paying like $10,000 a month to stay in business. When I've already got $5,000 or $6,000 in each pit for a reclamation bond, plus 4 or 5 years of trying to get the permits put together. I mean,
Mr. Dean, it'll be five years for $5,000, so you'd be paying $1,000 a year.
We've got 4 pits in each county,
We have 4 pits.
so it's $1,000 per year per pit.
Yeah,
I guess I'd have to see his business plan, but to me, it doesn't sound like, for me, that's.
Maybe you want to just buy it from me.
no, all right, you guys.
It's for sale today.
I
How
think,
much you sell that decorative stone for, Mr.
Well, okay, well, you got my attention.
Mr. Dean?
Okay.
No, we're moving on, Mr. Dean. We
Okay.
love you.
I think PJ explained it perfectly, or Michelle did that, is I think in the future, we're going to look at that and separate from large to big to small. And I think right now, this seems quite a bit, but I would put some trust in our staff to evaluate this on a timely manner. Maybe even over the weekend, we could look at some stuff, so maybe spread something out. I don't know. I mean, anything can be worked out between now and Monday
Well,
with some sleep.
yeah. For us, it is a lot of money. We're a family business.
Sure.
It's a lot of money for us.
Sure.
Our insurance doubled in the last 2 years. I mean,
Sure. All right.
but, yeah, there was one other thing.
Well, are you sticking to what they're talking about here?
Funny, James.
Page 20 is what we're on.
This is something that's really kind of confusing, though, and I just wanted to clear it real quickly.
I'd
while
let you
I'm
come
here.
back up.
Well, it's on the conditional use permit for the mineral, because you've got me in the mineral. And this permit, as I understand it, is is a conditional use permit in itself for the sand and gravel. So now you're saying that you need a conditional use permit for the minerals. So now not only do you have the conditional use permit that we're using as a permit, now you're adding one for the mineral, which is okay.
Oh,
But do you understand what I'm saying?
yeah. Chairman?
Because your conditional use, this is your conditional use
Okay, James.
permit
Okay, James.
for sand and gravel.
Right, but the mineral has no permit. We have no, I'm sorry,
Well,
we have
if
no
you
ordinance.
used this-
We have no, we would use some of it probably when we did minerals, but we have no ordinance at this point for minerals.
Okay.
So you're gonna run through, and they'll probably, when you run through under a conditional use permit, they'll probably use this, if I'm guessing, as a reference. Am I correct? Okay.
Yeah, but I have been, I guess, put in to minerals because I am with the state, but it says in your thing, mine, stone for construction, which all of my stone goes to construction, so.
Follow up. But you were right, if I'm thinking about this, because if we do it as a conditional use permit, you'll come up every year on review, and you could be paying you could be right, you could be paying $5,000.
It'll take all the fun right out of it for me.
Okay, so James, you were right, so I appreciate that.
But do you see what I'm saying on the conditional use permit?
Yeah.
On the mineral?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, James.
Everybody's clear.
That's right.
Okay. Does anybody have a solution?
Let me look at it with the staff and then come back, which makes sense for conditional use, having to do it every year. Does that make sense?
Okay.
With that?
So you're done with Deb?
Yes,
You
sir.
got some more?
Yes, sir.
I've got
Mark?
a motion to,
Mr. Fairby.
when I went to school, E came after D before F, and I don't see an E on here, but that said, I recommend that we delete sub F, section 511, let's eliminate F.
Staff got any recommendations on that? I'd like to hear.
The reason that was put in, if there was a large operation that came in, then, I mean, you can kind of go both ways, I guess, on how you look at it. If there was a large mining operation that came in the hills, they would be subject and pay $300.
Thanks,
And it
Brittany.
would take staff.
I would suggest, Mr. Fairby, that we keep that as is and give staff time to come up with some changes for Tuesday so we can differentiate and help somebody out. Sounds like Mark's okay with that.
Do that.
Are you okay with that?
Well, yes, but in the larger scope of things, if a business comes in here of that size, that's jobs and that's real economic development. So I have no problem providing them free service because that's jobs and economic development. That's what America is about. Thank you.
Thanks. So there wasn't a second on his motion. So is there a motion? Oh, looks like Mrs.
I'm sorry, Michelle Hoffman, State's Attorney's Office. With regard to being able to rewrite that provision by Tuesday, I don't think that's possible. It would be our intent, though, to immediately, I mean, this is going to be in the, if it's passed and it's published in 20 days therefrom, it goes into effect, but it would be our intent to immediately take a look at that issue and rewrite that. So in a very short period of time, most likely by April, May, we could have an amendment before the board.
Thanks, Michelle. I was just trying to rush you a little bit, so. No, I think that's acceptable.
Chairman,
So,
we won't be rewriting it. It'll still have to be a conditional use permit, Michelle. It will still have to be conditional use. I guess what I'm saying rewrite is the amount, because the conditional use, you'll have no regulation over mineral mining at all without it. Because it would be under conditional use, pay $300 and follow those stipulations.
No, what we're saying is actually, we would define what is large and what is small-scale mining, and charge
Okay.
accordingly.
No, we're not going there. I don't think hopefully that's not where the board's going for large and small.
well,
thought
I
it
think
was-
eventually, yes, at some point, but not right now. No, that's what Michelle's saying. That takes more time. That's not,
have to rewrite this whole ordinance.
it's come
Yeah.
way later, you know.
Yes, sir.
One more time, Mr. Chair, $5,000 is a unnecessary restriction on on
okay.
capitalism.
PJ,
On proposed section 511F4, that 4 needs to be a 5.
okay.
All right, guys.
Is there any motion on the floor?
There was, I thought we approved it. Seconded.
Oh, Deb and Mark moved to approve as is with the changes of, 2,500 and 1,000
Right.
and the 5,000. Mr. DeSanto.
I don't like the 5,000 either. I mean, I'll approve the rest.
We're going to change it.
We're going to change it.
Yes, because of conditional use permits, that's $5,000 a year. Conditional use permits are per year. What?
That's for,
Conditional use permits are only a one-time. There's no renewal fees in conditional use permits. They're renewed or reviewed, and they're, like, when we review them, so they pay the $370 on a conditional use permit. Right now, with their fee structure, they pay the $370, and then they're reviewed in a year, in 3 years, and 5 years. But they only pay a review fee if they fail to provide information or they fail to meet a condition. So that's a one-time, lifetime. That's it. So,
Not bad,
because
then.
currently how conditional use permits, they run with the piece of property. So once it's paid, it just,
So I'll
Yeah.
amend my motion. I guess I'm not looking to change that then.
well, I don't think,
I would leave it as is. If it's for a lifetime, you're paying $5,000 for a lifetime for a permit until you come back in or have revocation or whatever. It's cheap.
so your amended motion is to keep it as is, no changes.
Right, leave 2,500, 1,000. Number one would be 2,500. Number two would be 1,000. Transfer same, conditional use permit, and then 5,000. Since it's for lifetime, 5,000 for a permit, you're not gonna find that most anywhere. Lawrence County is 10,000.
Motion makers amended her motion, the second are okay with that?
I'll second for a little further discussion.
Second for further discussion, Mr. DeSanto.
Brittany? My biggest concern is people like Mr. Dean. So what you're telling me is that if he opens a gravel pit, he's going to pay $5,000 under that conditional use permit, and then that's it. But he'll still have to pay a renewal of 1,000 every year, correct? No, just the 5.
No, he wouldn't, because he's not under the mining permit provision. He's under the conditional use permit because he's in minerals and not
$5,000 one time.
one time.
Okay.
Okay, I think we're clear.
One more time. That's excessive.
3 times.
Excessive barrier for somebody that wants to go out and find some dimension or decorative or whatever, stone, which is not aggregate, obviously. That's a barrier to entry. That's a barrier to continued operation.
Thanks, George. Now, I'll just clarify again that they plan on doing some modifying work after this. And so it doesn't mean it's set, as Michelle said, it's not set in stone. Okay. So we're going to ready to take a vote. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Roll call vote.
Buskerud?
Aye.
DeSanto?
Aye.
Farabee?
No.
Hadcock?
Aye.
LaCroy?
Aye. All right, it looks like we don't have to take a total vote on this, but I think I need to keep my promise that we talked that, we're having a special meeting on Tuesday at 9 a.m., second reading. We've made some changes here. Do we have some people who have a desire to share some of the changes right now? We'll have to keep it at a 3-minute limit because we got a few people that will go way over if we do, but I'll keep with my promise.
I want Ms. Parker to spend her 15 minutes up here.
George likes Ms. Parker.
All right, you guys.
Good speaker.
Sir.
Thank you. Jason Smiley, attorney on behalf of GCC, the cement plant. My partner Quentin Riggins was here the other day. I was unavailable, and I think he gave you this pitch then as well. I'm here once again to request the county acknowledge that the property that GCC purchased from the state of South Dakota is exempt from this ordinance as a matter of state law. I'm just one attorney, and I know you have your own legal counsel, but I will tell you, I have spoken with probably half a dozen other attorneys about this issue. And there's only one that I can find that disagrees with me that this property is exempt as a matter of state law. So I don't see what's difficult about this when you look at the Enabling Act language. I think it's very clear what the purpose was. It says, in connection with the sale of substantially all of the assets of the South Dakota State Cement Plant Commission, to enable the continued operation and use of real property relating to the business of the cement plant. That is the purpose that they enacted these statutes, including the ones that I've pointed out in my letters to the commission that exempt this property. Okay. So I don't see what's controversial about that. I don't see what's controversial about the Enabling Act language. And here's my concern if you don't do this, okay, is 8 years from now, when all of the members of this board are gone, when the planning commission is different, when the planning staff is different, somebody looks at this situation and says, hey, where's the permit that's supposed to be there? Okay. Then what do we have? Well, you just got done talking about a stop work order, right? So somebody goes out and says, where's your permit? And now we have a stop work order issued. And now we have a real serious problem. And that's my concern, and I'm trying to avoid that issue from happening in the future. I can give you all the economic stats that support the reasoning for that. The fact that they paid $252 million when they purchased it from the state of South Dakota. The fact that passing this legislation was part of the deal when they bought the property. All of those reasons support the rationale that I'm providing to you. Okay? Nobody would ever buy this property if they thought for 1 second there was one chance that they thought they wouldn't be able to mine it as a result of the permit process. I thank you for your time.
Thanks, Jason.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to ask a question if I could.
Mr. Oh, they can still, he can ask a question. He wants to drag it.
Yes, please. Are you suggesting that somewhere in this proposed amendment to the Pennington County Planning or Zoning Ordinance that those state statutes be included, like maybe under applicability?
Yes, sir. And in fact, I've proposed specific language in the letter that I sent to the commission dated February 1. I would propose it state somewhere in the ordinance, pursuant to SDCL 11-2-66 and SDCL 11-4-30, the following properties shall be exempt from the permit requirements of this section, : all real property owned, leased, or otherwise held by the state of South Dakota by and through the South Dakota State Cement Plant Commission as of December 28, 2000. It basically tracks the statute verbatim, and that would be my proposal.
And under applicability, or where in the subsection?
I believe that would be a perfect place to put it.
I would so move, Mr. Chair.
We're in discussion now, so we're gonna have to redo it.
Oh, we can waive that. I so move.
No, I laid out the plans for we want to hear everybody's part here before we start going back and doing that.
And GCC.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to say something.
Mr. Buskard.
I would share, that sounds very authentic, and I guess I would sure like to have some legal work done to make sure that that's correct, because I'm old enough to remember when former Governor Janklow came out and begged Pennington County to go along with the sale because we were going to get millions of dollars in property taxes every year. Well, we see how that turned out. We don't. So I guess I wanted to make sure that this is a little more legitimate deal than that was.
Thanks, Ron. Michelle?
Michelle Hoffman, State's Attorney's Office. Perhaps I can address Mr. Buskard's concerns. First of all, it's a standard rule of statutory construction that you interpret a statute based upon the actual language used. I'd point out that the statute that Mr. Smiley is relying on specifically states that the real property is hereby zoned to conform to use. It in no way exempts GCC from regulation. I'd further point out that as part of Special Bill 1 in 2000, there were other changes that were made to existing codified law. For instance, Chapter 43-2A, specifically Section 43-2A-2, which was in effect then and still is in effect today, stated no alien who is not a resident of this state, of some state or territory of the United States or of the District of Columbia, and no foreign government shall hereafter acquire agricultural lands or any interest therein exceeding 160 acres. So under that statute, GCC was not going to be able to purchase the cement plant from the state. So as part of SB 1, besides rezoning the property, which is what the clear language of the statute Mr. Smiley relies upon, the legislation added special language. It stated that the restriction of this chapter does not apply to agricultural land owned by a corporation for immediate or potential use in non-farming purposes. And it also goes on to state that all real property owned or held by the state of South Dakota by and through the South Dakota State Cement Plant Commission as of December 28, 2000 is owned or held by its successors entitled for immediate or potential use for non-farming purposes. So the purpose of this particular provision was not to exempt, or SB 1 was not to exempt the cement plant from regulation. The purpose of SB 1 was solely facilitate the sale of the property. And yes, the purpose of the sale of the property was so that GCC could operate the cement plant. But again, it was not to exclude regulation. And I would note that in the attachments Mr. Smiley presents, there was a November 1979
That's good, Michelle. I think we're good.
Chairman,
Okay.
Please.
Chairman, I have a question.
Ms. Hadcock.
Okay, so we went through 3-minute public comment before we started this, and now we have someone come up and wants to change something from the beginning of an ordinance. That should have been at the beginning of this, not at the end of an ordinance, what we just went through. You had 3 minutes of public comment. How come it wasn't said? Did you say that then?
You told us we were going to be able to make public comment at the end.
But we also had it at the beginning,
No.
Jason Smiling, so
Yeah,
we could
not
figure
here.
out where
I'll
you were
take-
going instead of going page by page and then come back at the end and
Okay. Okay.
You're not in charge either,
Okay.
George.
That's enough, guys. It was laid out clear at the beginning of the meeting that to come up and have public comment, there's some changes because we were going to work on it afterwards. And then I made it clear afterwards that we would take discussions after the work that we've done to do some work. So I think everybody's on the right page, but I think just got misconstrued. We appreciate what you bringing it up, but we know it's been brought up before. So with that, is there anybody else who'd like to come up and do 3 minutes? Nancy?
I don't care if he wants to change stuff, not at the end.
As I understand the rules, I'm only allowed to comment on your changes, right?
You may comment on anything you want.
Okay,
You got
3
3
minutes.
minutes.
Okay, I'm just commenting on your changes because I thought that's what I'm supposed to do. Okay, when you extended the notice to a half mile, thank you very much for doing that. I appreciate it very much. I tear back to page 7 of 20, where you have the site plan and what they're supposed to show you. And on that, the location of all structures within 300 feet and the topographic map of 300 feet. We've gone through these iterations where we started out doing 300 feet, then we moved it to 500 feet, then we moved it to a half mile. So we're continually changing the zone of impacted people that have to be contacted. So the question is, do you want to make the site plan now show people within 500 feet or a half mile, and who has the responsibility to figure out who lives within a half mile? Okay, that's comment number 1. Okay, let's go on to these other pages. Okay, so you all are discussing, and I don't think you figured it out, what to do about complaints, and they gave an example of a car being driven off the road. I'll give you a different type of example. Somebody has lung problems. They have emphysema. The dust is bothering them, but it's not that bad. Their emphysema gets worse. They go to their doctor. The doctor tells them you have to do something about the dust in the air. And then 2 years later, after the dust started, they complain to you. Why? Because their health is deteriorated, and what was not an issue before is now an issue. Or there's a kind neighbor who doesn't want to complain about his other neighbor, and, you know, the dust is bad one day, then it gets better, then it gets bad another day, then it gets better, and after a while, their patience with this ongoing problem that's iterative runs out, and then they complain. Or there's another example of the person who is worried about the dust, and they call it DNR, not the Pennington County. And they have no clue that they're supposed to call you guys up. So if you're going to have these time limits expiring where they have to complain to you within a certain time period of when it all starts, I'm suggesting that that is clearly said in those letters that you send out to everybody to announce, you know, that there's a mine hearing, that you let them know that they're going to have to complain within a certain number of days if they want their complaint to be considered, and that you post that information up on signs all around the property, because the public is going to have no clue that they have to complain within 30 days or 60 days. And there's a lot of South Dakotans who sort of respect private property and don't want to complain about the neighbor, who will be patient until their patience runs out. You know, I know people like that. So, okay, how am I doing for time?
You're gonna be up here in just a second.
Okay,
You're up.
all All right.
Is it done?
Time's up.
Your time's up, Nancy.
Okay, I'm just going to show you something. Here's Pennington County, at Lawrence County, defines in their definition section, small and large scale. There's based on employees, amount of land disturbed, amount of money earned. It's here. They've already done it. You could copy it in a day.
Thanks,
It
Nancy.
would not require a lot of work.
Thank you, Nancy.
Okay, so.
Looks like Mr. Hickey.
Mike Hickey. I just have a question. You talked about the stop work order, and you basically approved that. Does the stop work order have any application to existing operations? Because if you read it, it says a site is being operated or maintained in a manner which violates Section 320. Section 320 doesn't apply to, other than Section G, I guess, which deals with lighting and other things like that, hours of operation. So you can issue a stop order if the lights aren't on. A site is being operated or maintained in a manner contrary to the conditions of the mining permit. That doesn't apply because there is no mining permit. You've grandfathered it in. The next one is mining operations are occurring without a required permit under Section 320 or other local, state, or federal laws. That doesn't apply because you've exempted them from that. There's just, I understand you want to protect existing operations, and I don't have a problem with that, but somehow, some way, you have to have at least a little bit of regulation or a little bit of oversight on those operations. I mean, I'm not saying, like I told you the other day, Pete Lean is a great company. They do it right. I'm not saying that you don't ever look at that, but you have to have something on existing operations. I mean, there's 192, as I understand, 192 sites in Pennington County, and you've basically just left them alone to continue to operate either good or bad without any oversight. And if I've overstated it, I'm sure that somebody will correct me, but this, I mean, just looking at the stop order, it just doesn't make any sense to me. And I'd like you to at least think about that just because it's a grandfather doesn't mean that they should get carte blanche. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hickey.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. DeSanto.
can I ask Michelle a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Under the current stop work order that we have here, does that exempt us? Let's say, for example, there's a mine that's in operation that in the past has never polluted the water nearby, but all of a sudden it starts polluting the water. We cannot, am I to understand, Mr. Hickey, that we cannot issue a stop work order to that mine if they're polluting the water?
No, I think what Mr. Hickey is indicating is that this particular section of stop work order is applicable to new mining applications, but I would submit that if in that scenario, our office planning department would issue a stop work order and we would pursue that matter under a public nuisance ordinance, but we wouldn't just stand by. We would issue a stop work order under the idea that they're threatening the health, welfare, and safety of the community.
Thank you.
Brian.
Brian Tiedemann from Pete Lean and Sons, and PJ may be able to kind of help reinforce this, but through committee we talked about this. The existing operations would still be required to meet the requirements of their existing Pennington County construction permit, which within that permit there is the stop work order process. So you're still being held to the same standards of the permit that you were operating under. And I think it's covered there. So I just want to point that out.
Very good. Thank you, Brian.
I'd like to make a point. You know, I know we're getting toward the end of the night, and a lot of people are tired and probably repeated themselves over and over many times. But I just stress that if there's something that after sitting through all these meetings that you really want to stress and get to the point to, please type it out and get it to us. before Monday. I just really stress that because that gives us a little time in the evening to go through it and so forth. I mean, we're taking notes now, but a piece of paper with your thoughts and changes. I've got your whole book here.
Email.
You can email us too. It's on the website.
Holly sends us your emails, Nancy, I have them all. All the emails that you have sent out, all of us have got them, when you sent them to Holly. Everything that you said, Holly, we have.
Yeah, but she said he said he wants them before Monday. Nancy, I have my work email on my phone. I will be working this weekend. So just please send them and I'll get them to the board. Okay?
I just asked that because I think that's fair. Because I think you guys are gonna walk out of here tonight going, I wish I would have said this, I wish I could have thought about that. Take some time, email them out, and we'll get them. You heard Holly said she'll work on the weekend and get it to us.
Chairman,
Ms. Hadcock.
bottom line is, since this had been in fruition, this is a working draft. And I kept saying it from the beginning, whether you're on the committee, you're off the committee, public or professional or in the county, it's a working draft. It can be changed at any time. So bottom line is we had nothing and we have something to work from and been working on this. We're on draft 11, I think. We have over 200 comments. So we appreciate everything that everybody's done and we are listening. You're not going to get everything you want in one sense, but we have worked with the mining companies. We have worked with the public. We are trying to find that solution in between. And I think with your help, we have all done a really good job to get where we are today. And this board of commissioners, as well as this planning commission, I think have worked really hard to get where we are. So I appreciate everybody's work on this because it's been a long year and a half almost. So thank you, everyone has been helping us on this.
Mr. Chair.
Ms. Hadcock. Mr. Farabee.
Mr. Tiedemann mentioned construction permits. I guess I'd like to ask him, does his mining operation or any mining operation he know of have a construction permit?
Simply put, yes, all of our sites have a construction permit.
So if I can follow up, then the document I got, it says effective 2013. So retroactively, you got construction permits? Thank you.
Not sure what you're
That's
asking.
okay.
Yeah.
Let's move on.
Thanks, Brian. Is there anybody else that would like to speak? Or would they prefer to do their letters? Okay. With nothing else, this is just a working document. Second reading will be Tuesday at 9 o'clock.
Thank you.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Moved by Hadcock, seconded by Buster to adjourn. All in favor indicate by aye. Roll call vote.
Busker,
Mess you up with that, don't I?
Making me.
Aye.
DeSanto,
Aye.
Farabee,
Yes.
Hadcock,
Aye.
LaCroy.
Aye.